the new Schedule 3 or the amended Schedule 3 and Caro 2020. Now, those who have started going through would have felt that the spirit of this is slightly different from what it used to be in the past. I'll come to that a little later. But before that, I had sent the presentation, PPT, the Excel format of the new Schedule 3 and a Word format, editable Word format of Caro 2020 to the members. I hope all of you would have received it. If not, towards the end of my presentation, I will share my mail ID and we can continue to interact. The whole idea was to say that, okay, I did some homework and I told the Ernakulam branch chairman to organize a program. Unless there is a compulsion, we do not learn. And so we organized that program and I presented the Schedule 3. I think it was Caro that time. Then other branches started following, and this is the 7th branch in Kerala. Outside Kerala also we had done. Day before yesterday, incidentally, I don't know some of you logged in. SIRC had organized a program. As I was fortunate to be the speaker. We had 1,340 registrations. And the 1,100, the maximum at one point of time was 1,100 members online attended. A great interaction. We had a lot of questions. I'm expecting questions today also. We'll make it, we break in between, have relevant questions asked in order not monotony of a long monologue. The topic is that Schedule 3 and Schedule 3 amendments have a far-reaching impact. Before going to Schedule 3, those who are new, Chairman rightly said, some of you would have come from abroad, some of you have got into practice from the industry. So my first request for every chartered accountant, irrespective of age seniority, is to reinvent corporate law practice. And one partner can be an IP. This is really promising. Insolvency practice, corporate law practice. In the last many years, very unfortunately, talking about tax and GST, we have pledged our corporate law practice, very few firms who have pledged our corporate law practice to company secretaries without any reason. It is lucrative, it is interesting, and also young members should know that many of the customer areas of practice are fading out. Tax audit limits are getting kind of increased every year, and transactions are getting digitized more and more. And GST audit is gone. Let us take that positively, but there are newer areas which are coming up. We'll discuss towards the end of the presentation. Time and mood permits. So therefore, it's very important that we do corporate law practice. But it should not be a passive corporate law practice. Passive corporate practice is dangerous. The client would think that auditors will do everything. Filing of return, filing of annual return, filing of audited accounts, all forms, a director of changes, every year 12 would be filed. All those things, he would expect. So active corporate law practice. And it should not be made part of the audit service. It should be separately billable. Client interactions has to be completely different. So therefore, that is a note which I would like to start with. So we do not go into any of the schedules directly. The Companies Act Schedule 3, we travel through Section 129. It is in Chapter 9. Companies Act 2013, there are two important chapters for corporate accountants and auditors. Chapter 9, Section 128 to 138, books of accounts starting up to internal audit. The Section 129 is the one which talks about the form and content of financial statements. In the 56 Act, it was Section 211, seniors would remember. And some of you are fortunate never having had to change over from 56 Act to 2013 Act. And Act is still evolving. 9 years into its existence, Companies Act 2013 is still evolving. The Company Law Committee is making a lot of changes, mainly because to enhance ease of doing business and reduce cost of complaints. We are trying to be very, very industry-friendly, business-friendly environment. Because of GST and IBC, I hope you know that because of GST and IBC, the ease of doing business ranking of India has gone up from 111 to 66 or so now. I think 66. It's quite encouraging that we have, yes, captain, football captain. Eh? Ah. How any match out? Yeah. Okay. So this is something which now with a lot of on a macro scale. A lot of projects are happening in smaller towns also, whether it's Cochin or Trichy. In the Davos summit recently, there was a discussion which I heard from an expert that the new term is evolving, ABC. It stands for anything but China. there's a global despair about China. So people are looking at India for larger projects. We will surely get downstream projects. So that kind of thinking is happening. So India is tying up with places like Vietnam and all that to have, joint projects. Therefore, a lot of projects are likely to come. I was saying this from the point of view of the economy moving forward. And of course, there is generally a gloom around. Elon Musk having said that the outlook was very bad and yes, retrenched a lot of people. Market has been crashing. Yesterday, Sensex tanked 1,011 points. And therefore, I think this will be in the short term. And because of the liquidity issue, RBI is increasing the rates beyond a certain stage. They should not do. Bankers are not placing it on deposits, except very few banks. Therefore, we have bankers here also. I don't want to get into that. Thrissur on the banking expertise but still, so this is a macro environment. So in that, we are amending the Companies Act very frequently. But when you come to this Schedule 3 and Caro 2020, it's becoming very, very difficult. Compliance is slightly difficult. Caro, there are very onerous reporting responsibilities, including predicting of the future of an entity, the financial health of an entity. Now, if those who have gone through, if you look at the common spirit, this thread of both Schedule 3 and Caro 2020, there are a lot of common points in Schedule 3 and Caro 2020. When the presentation unfolds, it will become clear. It is made for a banker. All these amendments are from a banking point of view. All the additional disclosures. Not without, we're not surprised because one of the person was actively involved in this was Samarjit Chopra, sir, former president of ICA. I'm not saying that he's bad or anything, but then the amendments which are demanding today are mainly from the perspective of banker. All those things, current assets, returns filed quarterly, as you see, and also aging. The common thinking is that whatever is old, not human beings, as far as figures are concerned, whatever is old is bad. We used to have only more than 6 months, less than 6 months debtors age-wise classification. Now debtors, we have 5 slots of classification. Trade payables, we don't call sundry debtors and creditors now. Trade receivables and trade payables, old has to be classified. Capital work in progress, aging has to be shown. Intangibles under development, it has to be shown. Same is the case with Caro. The auditor is asked to stretch beyond what is expected of a financial scrutiny and then to report on so many aspects. But whether we like it or not, this has come to stay. So we should essentially familiarize ourselves with the specific provisions of both these things. So with this broader introduction, I will now move on to the specific, starting with Schedule 3. So 129 says that financial statements of companies should be prepared in the format given in Schedule 3. 56 Act said in accordance with Schedule 6 or in a form as near thereto. That flexibility is not there in the 2013 Act. 109 says that it should be in accordance with, strictly in compliance with the provisions of Schedule 3. Schedule 3 has 3 divisions, as you know. Division 1 is where most of us are engaged in financial statements of a company whose financial statements are required to comply with companies' accounting standards. Or these are called, institutes also started calling them non-Ind AS companies. Non-Ind AS companies. Second one is Ind AS companies. Ind AS companies today, all listed companies and unlisted companies with net worth exceeding 250 crores are under Ind AS. A separate set of presentation for NBFC, which is there for the NBFCs with the paid-up capital, the net worth exceeding 250 crores. Mostly we are going to have our discussion on the first one, which being the majority of the thing. We'll start specifically with each item. The first point is that rounding off has become mandatory. One way it's good that 0.57, the punching either the auditor reaches or auditor sends an alarm, alert, trigger, only then it will happen. അവർ രണ്ടു വിധത്തില, ഒന്ന് നമ്മളിപ്പോൾ തന്നെയാണ് പ്രിപ്പയർ ചെയ്യുന്നത്, ക്ലോസ് സർക്കിൾ ആയതുകൊണ്ട് പറയാം, പുറത്തുള്ള ആരും ഇല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ CNDG ഒക്കെ കേൾക്കാൻ പാടില്ല അങ്ങനെ. അപ്പോ അതുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ otherwise, even if a company is able to have the excellent corporate accountant who is able to prepare Schedule 3 compliant, accounting standard compliant financial statements and bring it to us with a resolution, resolved that the draft accounts are approved by the board and forwarded to the auditors for their report, opinion and report thereof. Even then, in the main body of the auditor's report, Caro, we are to report whether the financial statements give all the information in the manner so required. And the clear item question reporting requirement on that. With that, we have to be familiar with Schedule 3 provisions. Even if a company is so internally powerful, internal muscles and wherewithal to do that. ഇതാണ് ക്ലാസിഫിക്കേഷൻ. ഇത് നമ്മൾ എടുപ്പിക്കുക, കൂടുതൽ എടുപ്പിക്കുക. ആണ് നോട്ട് കൊടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. Property, plant and equipment. The first part is there. നമ്മൾ നേരത്തെ ഉള്ളതാണ്. പുതിയതായിട്ട് വന്നിട്ടുള്ളത് amount of change due to revaluation. If change is 10% or more in the aggregate of the net carrying value of PPE, other adjustments related to depreciation, etc., shall be disclosed separately. Revaluation with a note. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ PPE എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മുടെ ഓഫീസിൽ എപ്പോഴും പറയുന്നത് ഫിക്സ്ഡ് അസറ്റ് ഷെഡ്യൂൾ, FA ഷെഡ്യൂൾ. FA ഷെഡ്യൂളിന്റെ കൂടെ കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ഡീറ്റെയിൽസ് ഓഫ് റീവാലുവേഷൻ കൊടുക്കുക. നമ്മുടെ കേസിൽ റീവാലുവേഷൻ ഉള്ള വന്നിട്ടില്ല. സോ പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ഡിസ്ക്ലോഷർ ഐ ഹാവ് നോട്ട് മെയ്ഡ്, ബട്ട് ദിസ് എ ന്യൂ requirement as far as revaluation of PPE and intangibles are concerned, been brought at par with property, plant and equipment. If you look at the composition of balance sheets, particularly in the new gen IT companies, startups and all that, tangible assets നെക്കാളും കൂടുതൽ പലപ്പോഴും വാല്യൂ ഇൻടാഞ്ചിബിൾസ് ആയിരിക്കും. പണ്ട് നമ്മൾ ഇൻടാഞ്ചിബിൾ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മുടെ ഫസ്റ്റ് തിങ്കിങ് ഗുഡ്വിൽ, പേറ്റന്റ്സ്, കോപ്പിറൈറ്റ്സ് ആണ്. മോസ്റ്റ്ലി ഇറ്റ് വിൽ ബി കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർ സോഫ്റ്റ്വെയർ, വെബ് ഡിസൈൻ കോഴ്സ് and all that. That can be capitalized. Accounting standard 26, to which we'll make a passing reference at the end of the session. So that has become huge, and intangible assets have to be seen with due care. Security deposits, again a cosmetic change. Long-term loans and advances മാറ്റിയിട്ട് other non-current assets like security deposits, long-term security deposits, rent deposits, etc., etc. EMDs, which are, if they are long-term, then that will be there for a long-term contract. The utilization of borrowings. ഇത് നമ്മുടെ ഓഡിറ്റേഴ്സ് റിപ്പോർട്ടിലായിരുന്നു ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നത്, കാരോയിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. Now the company is Schedule 3 in the financial statements under the notes on accounts. Whether the company has not used the borrowings from banks, where the company has not used the borrowings from there, full details of it. Term loan എടുക്കുന്നു, വർക്കിംഗ് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ വർക്കിംഗ് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ ലോൺ എടുത്ത് ടേം ലോൺ യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഫണ്ട്സ് സൈഫൺ ഔട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നു, റിയൽ എസ്റ്റേറ്റിൽ പോകുന്നു, അങ്ങനെ ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ you have to make a realistic analysis and the company has to report. This will be mostly under the long-term borrowings in the കീഴിലായിരിക്കും വരിക. നമ്മൾ ഇവിടെ വേറെ ഇതില്ലാത്ത കേസിൽ നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞു the company has used the loans taken for the purposes for which they have been taken. ഒരു സിമ്പിൾ നോട്ട് കൊടുത്ത് അവസാനിപ്പിക്കുക. പ്രശ്നമില്ലെങ്കിലും ഇത് പിന്നെ we have to say that all these points have to be included. Just because അവർ യൂസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഈ പോയിന്റ് ആപ്ലിക്കബിൾ അല്ല എന്നില്ല. You have to show it as a simple note under the working capital also you can give, but mostly this will happen in the case of long-term borrowings. Trade receivables, more than 6 months, less than 6 months, less than 6 months, 6 months, 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, more than 3 years. Now look at the top line. Outstanding for the following periods from the due date for payment. Due date from the 31st March, the position of debtors. Well, what is the due date? Assuming that you are giving 1 month's credit, hypothetically for a calculation. So amount which has been billed on, let us say, November 1st, will fall due on December 1st. Avudunnaanu ee age-wise classification edukkandu. So from the due date of payment, not from the invoice date. If there is a practice, or like ഞങ്ങളുടെ ബില്ലെല്ലാം all our bills are immediately payable എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞായിരിക്കും. ചാർട്ടർ അക്കൗണ്ട്സിന് ബില്ല് നമ്മുടെ ആഗ്രഹമല്ല, എന്റെ ബില്ല് അടിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, ആഗ്രഹമല്ല, പ്രിന്റ് ചെയ്ത് വെച്ചിരിക്കുക, പ്രിന്റഡ് ഫോർമാറ്റ് ആണ്. അതിലേക്ക് പിന്നെ വേർഡ് മറ്റേ ഇതിന്റെ കണ്ടന്റ് മാത്രമേ മാറുന്നുള്ളൂ. It's possible to change the client culture. നമ്മൾ മാറില്ല എന്ന് വിചാരിച്ചിട്ടാ കുറെയൊക്കെ മാറ്റാൻ പറ്റും. അറ്റ്ലീസ്റ്റ് ന്യൂ ക്ലയൻസ് വി ഷുഡ് പുട്ട് ന്യൂ റൂൾസ്. അപ്പൊ അവിടെ ഓഫീസിൽ സ്റ്റാൻഡ് ഓഫീസർ ആൾ വരുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ സീനിയർ നിങ്ങൾ രണ്ടുപേരും ഉണ്ട്, ആ ഒരു റെപ്യൂട്ടേഷൻ വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് വരുന്നത്. അവിടെ നമ്മൾ പഴയ ക്ലയന്റുമാരെ ഇൻഡെഫിനിറ്റ് ക്രെഡിറ്റ്, 12 months ക്രെഡിറ്റ്. അപ്പോൾ ആരെ സ്ട്രിക്ട് ഓഡിറ്റർ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ സ്ട്രിക്ട് ഓഡിറ്റർ ഇസ് വൺ ഹു വിൽ നോട്ട് ഡു കറന്റ് ഇയേഴ്സ് ഓഡിറ്റ് വിത്തൗട്ട് ഗെറ്റിംഗ് പ്രീവിയസ് ഇയേഴ്സ് ഫീസ്. എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ 12 മാസം ഫ്രീ ക്രെഡിറ്റ് ആണ്. ദാറ്റ് ഓൾ ഷുഡ് ചേഞ്ച്. നമ്മളെ ഗുസ്തി പിടിക്കുന്ന കേസ് ജെനുവിൻ ഡിഫിക്കൽറ്റി ഉള്ളത്. ഞങ്ങൾക്ക് ഒരു തിയേറ്റർ ക്ലയന്റ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, 2 ഗേൾസ് എന്നാ പറയാം, ഗേൾസ് ആണ് നടന്നത്. സെൻട്രൽ ടാക്കീസ് പറഞ്ഞാൽ നിങ്ങൾ ഉദയം പേര് പോകാൻ കാണാം. അതിൽ അഗൈൻ എ ന്യൂ ബിസിനസ് മോഡൽ. ദ ന്യൂ തിയേറ്റർ ഇസ് ഫണ്ടഡ് ബൈ booking.com. booking.com ആണ് ഫണ്ട് ചെയ്തിരിക്കുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് റീപേയ്മെന്റ്സ് ആർ ഗോയിങ്. കോവിഡ് ടൈം കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ക്ലോസ്. ഞങ്ങൾ പേയ്മെന്റ് കാര്യം പറഞ്ഞില്ല, ബട്ട് തിയേറ്റർ ഓപ്പൺ ചെയ്തു, രണ്ടാമത് തുടങ്ങി വന്നപ്പോഴത്തേക്കും ഇപ്പൊ തിയേറ്ററുകാർക്കൊക്കെ സുഖമായി. RRR വന്നു, KGF വന്നു, പിന്നെ ഇപ്പം കമലഹാസന്റെ വിക്രം വന്നു, മമ്മൂട്ടിയുടെ ഭീഷ്മോറും വന്നു. ലാലേട്ടൻ്റെ ഇവിടെ ഒന്നും പിന്നെ അങ്ങോട്ട് ഹിറ്റായില്ല. ഞാൻ 2 സൈഡും അല്ല തെറ്റിദ്ധരിക്കല്. എനിവേ, അപ്പൊ അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇത് പൈസ ഇഷ്ടം പോയി. പക്ഷെ അവർ തുടങ്ങിയ ഇതായപ്പോ വിത്തൗട്ട് കോളിംഗ്, വി ഡിഡ്ന്റ് വാണ്ട് ടു കോൾ. കാരണം ഒരു കുറച്ചൊരു ഇന്റിമസി ഒക്കെ ഉള്ളതുകൊണ്ട് ഞങ്ങളുടെ പഴയ സ്റ്റുഡന്റുമാണ്. അപ്പൊ then 2 weeks, within 2 weeks of the revenue streams paid all the pending bills. Not huge amounts, maybe 50,000-60,000 rupees, but they paid. അങ്ങനെയുള്ളിടത്തൊക്കെ ഇവിടെ ഇപ്പൊ കുഴപ്പമില്ല. അങ്ങോട്ട് പറഞ്ഞു.
If you feel some crammed or in this room itself, we had made arrangements online in the chairman's room. You can sit over there. You can say watch it as online itself.
Screen. But you'll miss out the interaction with this handsome young gentleman. ആത്മവിശ്വാസമാണല്ലോ നമ്മളെ മുമ്പോട്ട് നയിക്കുന്നത്, അല്ലേ? Yeah, okay. So where did I stray from? So that's it. So less than 6 months, 6 months to 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, more than 3 years. This is a new classification of trade receivables. Title deeds of immobile property not held in the name of the company. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു സംഭവം വരുമോ? Even Caro 2016 introduced ചെയ്തത്. Caro 2016 വന്നപ്പം I say how can that happen? അപ്പൊ ഇങ്ങനെ പല ആർഗ്യുമെന്റ്സ് ഉണ്ടായി. പല ആർഗ്യുമെന്റ്സ്. അപ്പം കേരളത്തിൽ അത്ര സ്ട്രിക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് പല സ്ഥലങ്ങളിലും മ്യൂട്ടേഷൻ നടക്കുന്നില്ല. നമ്മുടെ ഇവിടുത്തെ വില്ലേജ് റെക്കോർഡ്സിൽ നമ്മൾ 2 കമ്പനി തുടങ്ങി എന്റെ പ്രോപ്പർട്ടി കമ്പനിയിലേക്ക് ഇടുന്നു എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ പോരാ. ഇറ്റ് ഹാസ് ടു ബി കൺവെൻസിങ്, ഹാസ് ടു ബി ഡൺ. പോക്കുവരവ് നടത്തി, നാടൻ ഭാഷ പറയാം, പോക്കുവരവ് നടത്തി തണ്ടപ്പേര് മാറ്റി കമ്പനിയുടെ പേര് ടാക്സ് അടച്ചു കഴിയുമ്പോഴേ കമ്പനിയുടെ പേരിലാവുള്ളൂ. only then you can strictly speaking show in the balance sheet of the company. പണ്ട് ചാപ്റ്റർ 9 കൺവേർഷൻ, പാർട്ട് 9 കൺവേർഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അത്തരം കേസുകളിൽ the property of the firm will vest in the company എന്ന് പറയാം. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള വളരെ റെയർ കേസ് കാണാം. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ I thought this is a very weird clause, it's not required. ആ 2016 കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടാണെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു, 2016 അതിന് മുമ്പാ we were appointed by the official liquidator, High Court of Kerala, to do an investigation. കമ്പനിയുടെ പേര് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ഇവിടേക്ക് എല്ലാവരും അറിയുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ പറയുന്നില്ല. 18 of the high value properties in the balance sheet of the company, 18 high value properties were either in the name of the managing director, his wife or his son. കമ്പനിയുടെ പേര് അഡ്രസ്സിൽ പോലും ഇല്ല. And they were just brought into the books by passing an entry, land account debtor to director's capital account or chairman advance, and shares were allotted. And the property could be sold. കമ്പനി എങ്ങും അല്ലാതെ വിൽക്കാമായിരുന്നു. അങ്ങനത്തെ കേസസ് ഉണ്ട്. ഇപ്പൊ തമിഴ്നാട്ടിലൊക്കെ കുറച്ച് നമ്മളിപ്പോ കോയമ്പത്തൂർ ബ്രാഞ്ചിന്റെ റെസിഡൻഷ്യൽ I did in Munnar, and for Pondicherry and Chengalpet I did in Kumali. So അവിടേക്ക് ഡിസ്കഷൻ വന്നപ്പോൾ അവർ പറഞ്ഞ അങ്ങനത്തെ സിസ്റ്റം ഒക്കെ ഉണ്ടെന്ന് പറയുന്നു. ബട്ട് ടു മൈ നോളജ് നോ, അറ്റ്ലീസ്റ്റ് സിറ്റിംഗ് ഇൻ കേരള വി കൻ സേ ദാറ്റ്. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഫേക്ക് മിഡിൽ ഈസ്റ്റ് ഉള്ളവർക്ക് അറിയാം. മിഡിൽ ഈസ്റ്റിലെ ക്യാപിറ്റൽ അഡിക്വസി ഇല്ല, ലോൺ ലോസ് ആയെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ ബാങ്ക് പറയും, അമിറാത്തി പറയും, അർബാബ് പറയും, യു ഡു വൺ തിങ്, മൈ മീഡിയ സിറ്റി പ്രോപ്പർട്ടി, ഇന്റർനാഷണൽ സിറ്റി, ദർസ് എ പ്ലോട്ട് ദർ, യു ബ്രിങ് ഇറ്റ് ടു ദ കമ്പനീസ് ബാലൻസ് ഷീറ്റ്. ഇത് എൻട്രിയേ ഉള്ളൂ, അതിന്റെ ആധാരം പോലും കാണത്തില്ല. അപ്പൊ അത് കാണിച്ചിട്ട് സർട്ടിഫിക്കറ്റ് ഓണർഷിപ്പ് സിംഗിൾ ലാമിനേറ്റഡ് ഷീറ്റ്സ് ഒക്കെ ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അവർ എൻട്രി പാസ് ചെയ്യും, ലാൻഡ് അക്കൗണ്ട് ഡെറ്റർ ടു, അവിടെ ഇതാണ് ഷെയർ ഹോൾഡേഴ്സ് കറന്റ് അക്കൗണ്ട് എന്ന സിസ്റ്റം ഉണ്ട്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സിസ്റ്റം ഉണ്ട്, അതിൽ ക്രെഡിറ്റ് ചെയ്ത് നോക്കും. സോ ക്യാപിറ്റലായി ബാങ്കർ ഇസ് ഹാപ്പി. ഈവൻ ദ ബിഗ് ഫോർ വുഡ് സൈൻ ദ ബാലൻസ് ഷീറ്റ് വിത്തൗട്ട് ആസ്കിംഗ് ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ്. ബട്ട് ഹിയർ ദ സ്റ്റോറി ഇസ് ഡിഫറെന്റ്. ഇഫ് ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് സോ, property, plant and equipment, investment property, property retired from active use, others if any, and description of the property, land and building. Immobile മാത്രമേ ഉള്ളൂ കേട്ടോ, immobiles മാത്രമേ ഉള്ളൂ, land and building. Gross carrying value, title deeds ആരുടെ പേരിലാണ്, held in the name of, and whether the title deed holder is a promoter, property held since which date, and reason for not holding. Why is that you're not holding in the name of? ചിലപ്പം ലാൻഡ് സീലിംഗ് ഒക്കെ വെച്ചിട്ട് ചിലപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ആൾക്കാർ ചിട്ടി വളച്ചുകെട്ടൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നുണ്ടാവും. But then this is a bare reporting which has to be given if it is there. Otherwise, again, നമ്മുടെ fixed asset schedule, land and building എല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്. All the immobile properties listed above are registered in the name of the company. എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ് നോട്ട് കൊടുത്ത് അവസാനിപ്പിച്ചാൽ മതി. Revaluation ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ again, whether it is done by a registered valuer, and that is what you have to report. ഞാൻ സ്ലൈഡ്സിന്റെ എണ്ണം കുറയ്ക്കാനാണ്. അത് ഫിക്സ്ഡ് അസറ്റ്സിന്റെ പോയിന്റ്, PPയുടെ പോയിന്റ് ആണ്. The second point is a completely different one. In the case of loans and advances in the nature of loans granted to promoters, directors, key managerial personnel, and related parties, whether they're repayable on demand and without specifying any terms of repayment. ഈ ലാസ്റ്റ് കാറ്റഗറിയിലായിരിക്കും majority of loans and advances to directors, key managerial personnel, promoters, related parties. ആ ലോൺ കൊടുക്കുക പ്രത്യേകം ഒന്നുമില്ല, ലോൺ കൊടുത്തു, അതിന് റീപേയ്മെന്റ് ഷെഡ്യൂൾ ഒന്നും കാണണമെന്നില്ല. In such cases, the entire details have to be given, and what is the total percentage of such loans on the total L&A outstanding has to be given. This is a new disclosure. Loans, NBFC is applicable. NBFC is there in the regular. Other better point വരുന്നുണ്ട്. If your principal business is that of lending this thing, ആ സിസ്റ്റത്തിലുള്ളതാണെങ്കിൽ then it is okay. It is exempted. Loan given private limited companies exemption ഉണ്ട്. Certain public limited companies in exemption on loan to directors. 185 does not fully apply to all private limited companies. I'm not exactly able to recall, but there are provisions. Another danger which is there, though I'm not a taxman, I moved out from tax practice how many? 12 years back. I stopped income tax practice. I'll tell you why, time permits. So here 222E will be triggered. If you're a profit-making company, in fact, the department is sending notices. You are a profit-making company, you have reserves, and you have given loan to directors. Okay. 20%, substantial 20% deemed dividend, 222 was, that is being invoked. So one has to be extremely careful. In related party transactions is something which is, everywhere, every company that will be there. It is being siphoned out. Even the Companies Act 2013, they call it a 3S Act. 3S Act, Satyam, Sahara, and Sharda. Sahara, there are 500 private limited companies for Roy to siphon out public funds. Ambivalida project എല്ലാവർക്കും നമ്മുടെ cricket players, including Sachin ഒക്കെ അവിടെ വില്ലയൊക്കെ കൊടുത്തായിരുന്നു. He was, what is his name? സുബ്രത റോയ്. Yeah. നമ്മുടെ ഇവിടെ ഒരു SRK എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ പ്രോജക്റ്റ് വന്നു. യേശുദാസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ വിഗ്രഹം അടഞ്ഞു പോയി. പുള്ളി പരസ്യത്തിന് പല കൊണ്ട് പൈസ കൊടുത്തു. കമ്പനി ഇല്ല അവിടെ. സ്കൈ വിങ്സ് ഒക്കെ പറഞ്ഞ അഗ്രിമെന്റ് ഞാൻ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. കെട്ടിടം തീരുമ്പോൾ, പൈലിംഗ് പോലും ആയിട്ടില്ല, കെട്ടിടം തീരുമ്പോൾ 14ാം നിലയിൽ ഒരു 2 bedroom അപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റും ദാസേട്ടനും പ്രവിശേഷിക്കും യാത്ര ചെയ്യാൻ ബിസിനസ് ക്ലാസ് ടിക്കറ്റും. ഇതാണ് പുള്ളിയുടെ റെമ്യൂണറേഷൻ, വേറൊന്നുമില്ല. സോ a lot of people were cheated, and കുറച്ചു കാലം we were associated, then we knew that it is not worthy of association, so we resigned. So this is a new reporting requirement. Capital work in progress, yes, and intangible assets under development. Even aging on, I did mention in the introductory remarks that projects in progress, projects temporarily suspended. What can happen is make capital projects, building under construction, machinery under erection, could get stuck. ഇപ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ പുതിയൊരു ഇഷ്യൂ വരുന്നുണ്ട് അല്ലെ, ഈ പരിസ്ഥിതി ലോല മേഖലയുടെ ഒരു ഇഷ്യൂ വരുന്നത്, എക്കോളജിക്കലി ഫ്രജൈൽ സോൺസ്, EFS എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞു. അവിടെയൊക്കെ പ്രോജക്ട്സ് തുടങ്ങി വെച്ച് പല സ്റ്റക്ക് ആയിരിക്കാം. സോ ദി ഐഡിയ ഇസ് ടു സേ ദാറ്റ് capital work in progress in the normal courses should get completed, commissioned, capitalized, and used. That is not happening. The idea of saying that threadbare you disclose. Why is that the project is outstanding for more than 3 years? Capital work in progress stuck. What are the reasons? And total shall tally with capital work in progress in the balance sheet. 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, etc. But there could be long gestation projects. There's absolutely nothing wrong. This is disclosure. This is per se not a sin if it's all as per the plans. Time escalation, cost escalation, all those things one has to keep in mind. Time is money. Therefore, if there is a project gets delayed, extended, then naturally the cost will increase. For intangible assets under development also, project 1, project 2, you have to give. This one has to be careful because if we put the IT companies വരുമ്പോൾ, incidentally, startup advisory is a new vertical which we have developed over the last 2 years. working on the startups advisory. Initially, there might not be much money. Chris Gopalashan himself has said only 10% of the startups will blossom. Baaki 90% avadikku angu povum. Conceptual idea illa. Incidentally, I'm on the as a financial expert on KSIDC's committee on seed assistance on startups 25 lakhs. So we have meetings with all these startups individually. So പുതിയ പേരാണ് പിച്ച് ഡെക്ക് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്. നമ്മൾ പണ്ട് പ്രോജക്ട് റിപ്പോർട്ട് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു, പിന്നെ ബിസിനസ് പ്ലാൻ ആക്കി. സംഭവമൊക്കെ സെയിം ആണ്. ഒരു പ്രൊഫൈൽ കൊടുക്കുക, ഇതിന് തലയും വാല്യൂല്ല സാധനം പിള്ളേർ കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നു, ഒന്നിനും തലയും വാല്യൂ. ഒരു ഐഡിയ ഉണ്ട്, കുറെ കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർ മറ്റേ നെറ്റിൽ നിന്ന് ഡൗൺലോഡ് ചെയ്തൊരു ബ്രെയിൻ, അതിനകത്തൂടെ ഒരു കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർ പടമൊക്കെ കാണിച്ചു കൊണ്ടുവരും. സോ വാട്ട് ഇസ് യുവർ റവന്യൂ മോഡൽ? റവന്യൂ മോഡൽ മീൻസ് നോ ഐഡിയ. വാട്ട് ഇസ് എക്സ്പെക്ടഡ് വേറെ ഫിനാൻഷ്യൽസ് ഒന്നുമില്ല. പക്ഷെ അതിനകത്ത് അങ്ങനെയുള്ള ഒരു ഷേപ്പ് എടുക്കാവുന്ന നല്ല കേസുകളുള്ള ചെയ്യാം. ആൻഡ് രജിസ്ട്രേഷൻ ഓൾസോ, മിനിസ്ട്രി രജിസ്ട്രേഷൻ. മെനി ഓഫ് ദ സ്റ്റാർട്ടേഴ്സ് ഡു നോട്ട് നോ. ഈയിടെ കാലിക്കറ്റ് എന്നൊരു ക്ലയന്റ് വന്നു, ഒരു വലിയ പ്രീമിയം മേടിച്ച് ഷെയർ ഇഷ്യൂ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. സ്ട്രേറ്റ് അവേ വിൽ ബി ടാക്സ് അണ്ടർ 56(2) അല്ലേ? ഐ തിങ്ക് സോ. Premium or unrelated party. If it's an NRI, it's okay. From an Indian party, if you get premium, unrelated party beyond the fair market value, then that is taxed. So all that's called angel tax, right? Angel tax. Then you have the perquisite. If security shares are issued to promoters, it is taxed as a perquisite in the year of issue. Under sale 17(2), and then 80 IAB, the tax exemption. Budget 2022 extend ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. 31/3/22 ആയിരുന്നു സൺസെറ്റ്. That is extended to 31/3/2013. ഈ ബെനിഫിറ്റ്സ് എല്ലാം കിട്ടും provided you are registered with the ministry. It's not a big deal. You can get registered. Very recently we got a company which is into specified plants, a nursery with a lot of decorative plants. We got them registered as a startup. But the startup need not be essentially a tech company. I was just trying to say that. So instantly here in their balance sheets, that's what I was saying from. In the balance sheet of companies, what happens is first year expenditure, revenue expenditure, they don't write it off. Their capital is called product expenses on product development in progress. 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. There has to be an end to it. See, think of Tally in the making. Tally is software which most user friendly. We are all comfortable with that. Except manufacturing companies, like inventory is a problem. For traders, സാധാരണ ബിസിനസ്സുകൾക്കെല്ലാം അടിപൊളിയാണ്. അപ്പൊ ഇതിന്റെ മേക്കിംഗ് if it had taken 3 years, at that point of time, if we could expect this kind of a explosion in sales and value, we would have justified that. So the point here, I think the logic behind asking us to dissect the intangibles under development is to say that will eventually, there should be an indication that this would eventually become a commercially viable product or a concept which can be commercialized. That's the thinking. The disclosure requirement is very simple: 1 to 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and more than 3 years. Binami property, yes. If there are proceedings against a company under the Binami Transactions Prohibition Act of 1988, the entire details of such property, including year of acquisition, amount, beneficiaries, reference to the balance sheet, if it's in the books of account, it has to be completely given. It can happen. The second bullet is, or second para is on, if it is not in the books, then the fact shall be stated with reasons. Any proceedings against a company in this, either as an abettor who has initiated the transaction or transfer in whatever role that the company has acted, all the details have to be given. ഇതൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ MRL മേടിക്കണം. നമ്മൾ ഒരു MRL മേടിക്കണം, plus the guidance note. I'm coming to that. Institute is doing a lot of work. Institute is doing a lot of work. There's a guidance note on Caro 2020, which came long back, because Caro 2020, February 2020 lana adi issue cheythu. There's a bound book is there. We can buy it only on CDS now. Our branch il onnu sales illa. Your members should know. Or you can download. And 3 category kaanichirunna. 3 separate guidance note undu. Non-Ind-AS, Ind-AS, NBFC. 3 guidance note. So recently I was so happy to see an assistant of ours article, 3rd article. All statements prepared. He had apparently he had kept this guidance not open. Minimize it. Some sure I said that's a very good way of doing it. Instantly we trained our students. 3 rounds of training. Students. A good number of students. So those are the people who are doing it. So therefore, a partner did a training on Schedule 3, the Caro, and the student was asked to do a presentation. Fortnightly, Monday mornings we have a presentation at office. So students they are the field marshals. അവരാണ് ശരിക്കും ഇത് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. നമ്മൾ അതിന്റെ ഒരു ഫെമിലിയാരിറ്റി വെച്ചിട്ട് we have to get it. So this is about the Binami transfer. If it is not there, If this is not there again, there are no transactions, again in the fixed asset schedule, below the fixed asset schedule, we can give a note that there are no proceedings initiated pending against the company under the Benami Transactions Prohibition Act of 1988. This is very challenging. ഇതാണ് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞത്, ഭയങ്കര ഒരുപാട് നമ്മൾ ഇത് കമ്പനി പ്രസന്റ് ചെയ്യണ്ട. The same point is there. Many of these points are repeated as a responsibility of the auditor also. Here we are talking about quarterly returns of current assets filed with the banks and financial institutions. കാരോയിൽ 5 crores കൂടുതലുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മതി. വർക്കിംഗ് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ ബോറോയിങ് 5 crores കൂടുതലുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ കാരോയിൽ മതി. ഇവിടെ if every company has to give this detail, there is a working capital facility and we are filing quarterly returns of current assets. That's mainly inventory and receivables. Okay. Then the full details are to be given and working capital limit. അതിലേക്ക് വരാം, കാരോയിലാണ്. പിന്നെ അവിടെ ഒരു വേറെ ഇന്റർപ്രിട്ടേഷൻ ഉണ്ട്. I'll share that better wisdom which evolved over a period of time. Is it going okay? Pace കുഴപ്പമില്ല അല്ലേ? There are questions. You are full liberty. There are a lot of seniors. Here there's a challenge. See, ഒരാൾ എന്നോട് ചോദിച്ചതാണ്, സാറേ ഡെറ്റേഴ്സ് നമുക്ക് ബുക്കിലൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട്, സ്റ്റോക്ക് എവിടെയാ? സ്റ്റോക്ക് ഉണ്ടോ? സ്റ്റോക്ക് ഉണ്ട്, സ്റ്റോക്ക് രജിസ്റ്റർ ഉണ്ടോ? സ്റ്റോക്ക് രജിസ്റ്ററിന് അബ്സ്ട്രാക്ട് എടുത്ത ബാങ്കിൽ കൊടുത്തിട്ട് ഒരു ബന്ധവും കാണില്ല. ബന്ധമില്ലെങ്കിൽ ബന്ധമില്ല എന്ന് പറയാം, അത്രേ ഉള്ളൂ. There's no other go, there's no shortcut. You cannot go back and create a stock register. 4 quarter ഉണ്ട്, 30th June, 30th September, December and March. Okay, so this is very challenging and the idea is, ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞ ബാങ്കിന്റെ പറയാൻ കാര്യം, നമ്മുടെ ബാങ്കിങ് സിസ്റ്റം is completely shaken. I asked Shyam Srinivasan in a Federal Bank, CMD, നമ്മുടെ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടിലെ പ്രോഗ്രാമിന് വന്നപ്പോൾ, recently met him at the airport also. So why do you think is that Ind AS is made applicable to NBFCs? Why still not to banks? JOMON, you know the reason better. The banks are in bad shape. So if you apply the Ind AS principles, all the balance sheets will become, and the confidence that the world has in India today, we are the fastest growing economy. Even revised estimate was 8.2%. In the large economies are growing fast because of the recent developments, the Russia war, the China COVID, all those things, global issues. It has been reduced to 6.3 or so. That is a revised IMF estimate of the GDP growth. Even with that, we are growing as a bright spot in otherwise gloomy world economy. So there, it is a little bit of covering up, absolutely no doubt about it. But everywhere that happens, therefore, that makes sense for some more time. Gradually, slowly, we'll say that there's a rot in the banking system. 14 trillion expected bad loans. And today we have a bad loan bank also in our country. The actual figure may be more than double that, which means that 23-24% of the economy is strained. That's the situation. അപ്പോൾ ബാങ്കിന്റെ ബാലൻസ് ഷീറ്റ് സംഭവിക്കുന്ന, ബാങ്കില് നമ്മള് പ്രൊവിഷണല്, പ്രൊജക്റ്റഡ്, ഓഡിറ്റഡ്, അൺഓഡിറ്റഡ് എല്ലാം കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. കമ്പനീസ് കൊടുക്കും, ഓഡിറ്റേഴ്സ് വിൽ ഓൾസോ സൈൻ എവറിത്തിങ്. ബാങ്കർക്ക് വേണ്ട എന്താ? ഒരു ചാപ്പ, ഒരൊപ്പ്. പ്രൊവിഷണൽ ബാലൻസ് ഷീറ്റ് cannot be signed. Projected balance sheet cannot be signed. It's all prohibited. But many of us are very happily doing it without knowing the consequences. So, no, we should get copy from, see, normal situations അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു പ്രശ്നം ഞാൻ കാണുന്നില്ല. പക്ഷേ ഒരു സസ്പീഷ്യസ് സർക്കംസ്റ്റൻസ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ you should go one step further to ask the bank to give this a reporting requirement, write to the bank or get to them in larger audits where larger limits are there, and get the copies filed by the client from the bank. And then you can go to that instead of a guidance note suggests that. നമ്മുടെ സത്യം കഴിഞ്ഞ സമയത്ത്, സത്യം കഴിഞ്ഞ കുറച്ച് വർഷങ്ങളിൽ, ഇപ്പോൾ അവർ തുടരുന്നുണ്ടോന്ന് അറിയത്തില്ല, all the big four and major firms were obtaining bank confirmation directly from the bank. It was not even allowed to be routed through the client, thinking that some kind of a manipulation would be done, masala spicy or duplication would be done. That was what happened in Satyam. So this is where you have to, normal case file returns in copy, we accept that and then compare with the books of account. But in a situation where tally inventory modules are activated or SAP is working properly, there could be some rounding offs. Provided they have the DP and there are no issues. The issue happens when you have a loss. DP കൂടുതൽ വേണം, assets actually ഇല്ല, current liabilities വളരെ high ആണ്. അങ്ങനെ വരുമ്പോഴാണ് ഈ misrepresentation അല്ലെങ്കിൽ wrong reporting ഉണ്ടാകുന്നത്. അത് പുറത്തു കൊണ്ടുവരാന്നുള്ളതാണ് എൻ്റെ intention. To that extent, the company as well as the auditors have today a very important responsibility. So what I was trying to say is that in the balance sheets of constituents filed with banks in India, everywhere across the globe, India particularly, there is non-existent stock, crores and crores of hundreds of crores of non-existent stock lying in there, based on which DP was drawing power was determined. Never realizable sundry debtors are there, very old debtors are there. That is there. Current liabilities are suppressed. So in the result, you have a DP, you give extra money, and then that money is getting utilized for some other purpose, and the business finally dies, and the banker becomes an NPA, and all those things will happen. Now going for a CRP or whatever, corporate resolution process, all those things are happening. So the requirement is here. The practical difficulty is that young client case, we had concluded they're doing exceptionally well. March 22 അവരുടെ CC account credit. എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ am I saying credit or debit? Credit. Debit. Liability illa, plus ആണ്. So and then we asked them, and a bank never asked us to file quarter. So a company which is doing very well. 2 വർഷം കഴിഞ്ഞ് this company with the കമ്പനിയുടെ പേര് പറയാൻ 22 crores of turnover and 8 crores of PAT ആണ്. ഒരു very specialized design company. Bank has never asked them for a quarterly statement എന്നാണ് അവർ പറഞ്ഞത്. Then of course my partner checked with the bank also over the phone. Somehow they gave the information, and we put a note saying that the company has not filed any quarterly returns with the bank, with the ex-bank as it is not required by the said bank. But file ചെയ്ത കേസിൽ മാച്ച് ആകുന്നുണ്ടോ ഇല്ലയോ എന്നുള്ളത് പറഞ്ഞേ പറ്റൂ, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഇല്ല എന്ന് പറയേണ്ടി വരും. അപ്പൊ this will probably discipline, to some extent they'll discipline the wrong reporting and bring the situation better. Where the company is declared a willful defaulter by any bank or financial institution, then the complete details of date of declaration and the details of default. For all these things, the guidance note is making a reference to the RBI master circulars. Who is a willful defaulter? Willful defaulter is one who has the resources, who has the wherewithal, the funds are there, but adamant ആണ്, കൊടുക്കില്ല. Manavan sir കഴിഞ്ഞ ദിവസം പറഞ്ഞു, Manavan sir പറഞ്ഞില്ല, some people say that it is against my principle to pay interest. And it is against my interest to pay the principal. So both interest and principal do not get serviced. So that way that is there, and plus a defaulter would have essentially diverted the funds to some other company, related parties or whatever. So willful defaulter by definition is there, then the whole thing has to be. This you can essentially check. See if there is a working capital facility, a term loan which is getting serviced proper, and you have the confirmations, bank statements, all those things you're getting, this does not really get triggered at all. It will happen where there are accumulated non-compliances, large amount of overdues from financial institutions, banks. That is the time we look into this particular point. Disclosure of any transactions struck off companies. 248 under the new act and Paya Act 560. Whether the company has had transactions with opening current transaction, they're outstanding. So investments in securities, receivables, payables, shares held by struck off company. Chennai, somebody asked me this question, SIRC, whether if that struck off company is still holding shares in this company, but that has to be reported. Yes, any other outstanding balance to be there. Here again, how are we going to do this? Do we need to really scan through? ഇന്നലെ ഒരു മീഡിയം സൈസ് ക്ലയന്റിന്റെ സ്റ്റുഡൻസിന് ഇപ്പം കുറച്ച് പേരുടെ ഞാൻ എണ്ണം കുറച്ചതായിരുന്നു, വർക്ക് അലോക്കേഷൻ പുതിയ കുറച്ച് അസൈൻമെന്റ് വന്നതുകൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു ലെറ്റസ് ബ്രിങ് ദി ക്ലയന്റ് ഡേറ്റ ഇസ് ഫ്ലൈയിങ് അറൗണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ സ്റ്റുഡൻസിന്റെ എല്ലാം ലാപ്ടോപ്പിൽ ക്ലയന്റിന്റെ ടാലി ഡേറ്റ ഉണ്ട്. We make them implied oath of confidentiality, but there is no data security account. They share, they're very happy. അക്കൗണ്ടിന്റെ ലാപ്ടോപ്പിലുണ്ട്, അയാൾ വീട്ടിൽ കൊണ്ടുപോകും. നമ്മുടെ സ്റ്റുഡൻസിന്റെ ലാപ്ടോപ്പിലുണ്ട്. ഡെലിറ്റ് കഴിയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മുടെ ഫോൾഡറിൽ ഇട്ടിട്ട് ഡെലിറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറയണം അവർ ലാപ്ടോപ്പിൽ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന. So I said, let us do the ledger analysis. ഒരു 3 crore 4 crore company, I was relatively free and then did this. അപ്പം ഇത് റെഗുലർ ട്രാൻസാക്ഷൻസ് നടക്കുന്ന കമ്പനിയിൽ നമുക്ക് തിങ്കിങ്ങിന്റെ ആവശ്യമില്ല. There have been straight transactions, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഓപ്പണിംഗ് ബാലൻസ് which is not getting paid for moving for 3 years. There's been a single transaction, nothing else. Then you can do, with such cases, you should go one step further. SIN-based research you can do on the MCA website and see whether it's stuck off or not. You can do that. We should, actually. So, ഇപ്പോൾ പുതിയ സിറ്റുവേഷനിൽ 1872 cotton mills കേസിലാണ് നമ്മൾ എപ്പോഴും പിടിച്ചു തോന്നുന്നത്. The Judge Lopez said the auditor is only a watchdog, not a bloodhound. Gone are those days. നമ്മുടെ പിന്നെ മോഹനാർ ലെവി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ചാർട്ടർ അക്കൗണ്ടന്റ് ബാംഗ്ലൂർ, വെരി ഗുഡ് ഫ്രണ്ട് ഓഫ് മൈൻ. Some of you know him. He writes regularly in the business line. പുള്ളിയുടെ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ ഇതായിരുന്നു, the profession, the members of the profession individual and the profession has been clinging on to this very old decision like an insurance policy. This cannot continue to happen. We have to go a little deep further. ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ട് എപ്പോഴും സോഫൻ ചെയ്യാനാണ് നോക്കുന്നത്. നമ്മുടെ പണിയല്ല. Internal financial controls on the institute പറഞ്ഞു, we cannot do all the internal financial controls. We can do only ICOFR. പുതിയ term ആണ്, Big Four academic. Internal controls over financial reporting, ICOFR, ICOFR only. Fine, all right. But then here, in such situations, we may do well. We will do well only if we go to that extent of getting this. And challenges are many. For doing an audit, you need an army of people. You get into other assignments, a business valuation or a project report, you can do it all on your own without any assistance. And before office opens, you got 8 o'clock. By 9:30, a report is ready. If you have the templates handy, it is 10 times more lucrative than an audit. But students, it's a big question for members. And many of you may be, students, sir. Students in the person pudiya scheme of education in articles is getting reduced to 2 years. Third year ലാണ് ശരിക്കും ഔട്ട്പുട്ട്. Even third year നമ്മുടെയൊക്കെ ഫേമിൽ പറ്റുന്നത്, നമ്മൾ കൊടുക്കുന്ന ലീവ് ബോത്ത് ഗ്രൂപ്പ്സ് ആണെങ്കിൽ 4 മാസം ലീവ് ആണെങ്കിൽ അതിൻ്റെ കൂടെ 1 മാസം 15 ദിവസം പോകും MCSനും അഡ്വാൻസ് ITTക്കും. അത് കൃത്യം 15 ദിവസം കിട്ടത്തില്ല, സ്ലോട്ട് കിട്ടുന്ന അനുസരിച്ച് ചിലപ്പോൾ ഇടയ്ക്ക് പോകും. സോ 5.5 മാസം ഒക്കെയാണ് third yearൽ നമുക്ക് പോകുന്നത്. So we recently decided to make sure that some of them ഷെയർ ചെയ്തിട്ട് കുറച്ച് പേര് സെക്കൻഡ് ഇയർ തന്നെ കംപ്ലീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറയുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞ സിസ്റ്റം ഉണ്ടാക്കുന്നത് വിചാരിച്ചിരിക്കുക. Whole thing might change now. Council has passed. Now it's in public domain. All comments can be sent. In fact, Ernakulam branch program ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. Here also I think should do an interact on this new scheme. Industrial training mandatory ആവുന്നു. The minimum stipend 15,000 rupees. It is not without reason that നമ്മുടെ stipend double ആക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട് ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ institute stipend. But many of us are paying substantially more, 3 times, 4 times the institute what it is required to be paid. We cannot continue to bask in the glory of cheap labor, to put it very shortly, candidly. So, അത് പോകുന്നു. Third yearൽ they are going into industrial training. The reason is because 98% of the fresh CS passing out are going into industry. So they need not stay with an audit firm for the third year. 2 years audit firm experience is enough. Third year, let them go for some industrial training. Sorry, I have a sore throat. Please bear with me. So the Pandaki industrial training, just not because it's a very relevant point. Every one of us saying it's like a slight detour from the point on hand, which is related. How we do get all these details. It is easier said than done to say that sin-based research on the MCA. Who will do it? Who will bell the cat? So kids are not there, and പണ്ട് ഇൻഡസ്ട്രിയൽ ട്രെയിനിങ്ങിൽ പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ചിലപ്പോൾ ഒരു വൗച്ചിങ്, ട്രാവലിംഗ് എക്സ്പെൻസ് ചെക്കിംഗ് ആയിരിക്കും ആകുണ്ടാവുക. അങ്ങനെ അല്ലാത്തൊരു സിറ്റുവേഷനിലേക്കാണെങ്കിൽ, ടേക്ക് ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ, ഇഫ് ഇൻഫോസിസ് ഇസ് പ്ലാനിംഗ് ടു ഹയർ 200-300 ചാർട്ടർ അക്കൗണ്ട്സ് എവറി ഇയർ, let them have from out of this, let them have the third year, let them take articles, pay them 15,000 rupees, and once they qualify, probably will get absorbed. They will get used to the Infosys culture, Infosys kind of a perspective they will develop. That's very important. So that's the thinking. Anyway, need to deliberate on that. And but we have weathered all kinds of difficulties, so I don't see, somehow we will manage. And then trainees, we have to train them. In-house trainings have today become very important. Many of us still think that student വരുന്ന സമയത്ത് തന്നെ നമ്മുടെ ഇപ്പോഴത്തെ കോമ്പറ്റൻസ് വേണമെന്നാണ്. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഫ്രഷ് ചാർട്ടേഡ് അക്കൗണ്ടൻസ് റിക്രൂട്ട് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ, ഒരു 20-year-old firm recruits a fresh chartered accountant, I cannot expect him to have the same level of judgment, same level of maturity എന്ന് പറയുന്ന അറിയത്തില്ല, domain knowledge, application as we have today. It takes time. It's a seasoning like wine. It happens. Therefore, our patient training is also very important for the internal culture of well-meaning firms who have still got growth on their agenda. It's a prime item on the agenda. Growth, growing, progress. enhancement, upgrades in life and in practice. So this is a point, this is a way we will do. And moving on, charges, purely from a banker's perspective. Charge register it is from the lender's perspective. So now the charge registration, the whole thing has changed. We have 120 days to register charge by filing form CHG1, 120 days. After that, it cannot be done. Charge cannot be registered. Satisfaction is 30 days, CHG4. And other file, the question here, the company has to give is whether charges or satisfaction yet to be registered beyond the statutory period, then give the details. This will again come under both the long-term borrowings as well as the current, short-term borrowings, working capital loans. This point is not very common. If there are holdings and subsidiaries, section 287, read to the applicable rule says that in a chain of holdings and subsidiaries, a company cannot have more than 2 subsidiaries. A company, its subsidiary is B, B subsidiary is C. Stop there. You cannot go to the D level. This is what 287 in brief says. But if cherry exemption, if B is 100% subsidiary, B is 100% subsidiary, that layer will not be counted. So A, C, and D are possible. That is the basic provision. So if that is there, then the rules provisions have been complied with. The Pudhiya Sambhav. All the ratios have to be disclosed in the notes on accounts. Now, kore items on the format, if you have seen the format, what we've done is specifically identify the items, other regulatory information on a subhead. 3 ratios we have to give. Current ratio, debt equity ratio, debt service coverage ratio. Project finance debt service coverage ratio is the payment, how many times? That is debt service coverage ratio numerator PAT plus interest and depreciation divided by EMI, or rather divided by your principal and interest repayment obligation. So how many times is your profit, cash profit, sufficient to service your repayment obligations? What? That's a DSCR. Return on equity ratio, PAT divided by equity capital. Inventory turnover ratio. Trade receivables turnover ratio, debtors divided by credit sales, total credit sales. Total credit sales divided by average debtors outstanding or receivables outstanding. It's number of times. Trade payables also same way. Net capital turnover ratio, net profit ratio, we know, PAT over the turnover. Return on capital employed, return on investment. Investment is total assets. They take it as total assets investment. And if there is a variation, 25%, etc., plus 25%, the reason has to be given under remarks column. In this profitable company where, which we mentioned this year when it was finalized, the debt equity ratios come down substantially, because they have a huge profit. So reserves adds to the thing and the debt is reduced. So numerator is substantially reduced and denominator is substantially increased. So we said that the reduction in a debt equity ratio is because of the profits made during the year as well as the substantial repayment of debt, something like that. Courier prashamana. Inventory your receivables. Trade receivables is chit installments receivable will be your trade receivables, right? As well as priced and unpaid payable will be your trade payables. That will apply to the action. But then if you look at the yes. Return on investment, the formula. No, return on investment is PAT divided by total assets. I'll just refer. Students in the group, students in the students in the WhatsApp group, SIRC chairman WhatsApp. Secretary, resolution secretary WhatsApp secretary. And of course, it was useful for the election also. So, return on investment is a financial ratio used to calculate the benefit of an investor will receive in relation to their investment in the relation to their investment cost. So the formula is return on investment. The formula is a little complicated. No, here it's that particular return on investment. Just give me a minute. Guidance total കുറച്ചൊരു മിക്സപ്പ് ആണ്. ഞാൻ അതിലേക്ക് അത്രയും ഇത് പോയിട്ടില്ല. But it is return on investment is the total way we look at is that from individual perspective നമുക്ക് കൊടുക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. കമ്പനിയുടെ ആംഗിളിൽ നിന്നാണ്. കമ്പനിയുടെ ആംഗിളിൽ നിന്ന് the formula is PAT divided by total assets is a formula which I give. And in one of the cases, trade receivables ratio, turnover ratio. നമ്മുടെ റിസോർട്ട് ക്ലയന്റ് ഉണ്ട് മൂന്നാർ വന്നപ്പം ഇതിനകത്ത് അവർക്ക് കുറെ പൈസ അഡ്വാൻസ് ആയിട്ട് കിട്ടും. ബുക്കിംഗ്സ് ബൾക്ക് ബുക്കിംഗ് വരുമ്പോൾ ട്രാവൽ ഏജൻസ് കൊടുക്കും. So exactly it's not able to be arrived at, but at some point of time there is some receivable. So the guidance note says in such cases you don't have to complicate. Final outstanding debtors and total sales if you take, you can with a note you can finish it. But in the chart which we give, we have to give the formula of how we have, what is the denominator. നമ്മുടെ EPS നെ കാണിക്കുന്ന പോലെ we have to show the formula and finish it off. Yeah. Chit funds, sir? Yes. Trade receivable. Chit installments. No, what I'm saying is, chitnalla, and understanding പറയാം. അതായത് നമ്മൾ ചിറ്റാൾസിനകത്ത് വരുന്നതിനകത്ത് പെൻഡിങ് ചിറ്റ് ഇൻസ്റ്റാൾമെന്റ്സ് ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ നോട്ട് ഓൺ ദ പ്രൈസ് ക്വറീസ്. It is not your income, but it has to be collected and paid out, no? Income ആണെന്നില്ല. See, income, what you're trying to say is that should that debtor be represented by a credit of full income? ആണ് അതിന്റെ പോയിന്റ്. അങ്ങനെയല്ല, we get only the foreman's commission, whatever is there that you get it. And here the installments which are receivable, which are not being received for this purpose, according to me, should be taken as a trade receivable only. ചിട്ടയുടെ veterans ഒക്കെ ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. That is my thinking. Then you are trying to say that a chit company will not have trade receivable at all. I know. Sir, Chitta, reasonable familiarity, not like veterans like you. I'm not here to debate, but then the thinking is that any trade receivable need not be based on a sale. What about a service? What about a service? It's there. And many of the cases where, collection payment is setting off happens. Chittin's scheme, I hold on to this point. I mean, it is debatable. The installments you have fallen due, which have not been paid by the chittals, will become trade receivable. I'll just conclude. We'll continue to discuss towards the end of this. And payables, so then what the trade payable? Chitti adichu, kuri adichu, price edu, allengil auction vannu. If that is unpaid, it's a trade payable. Trade payable, that is what I think, because the business is of what? നമ്മൾ കളക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നു, 20 പേരുടെ അടുത്ത് കളക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നു. 20 പേരുടെ കളക്ട് ചെയ്തിട്ട് ആദ്യത്തെ ലേറ്റസ്റ്റ് ടേക്ക് ലോട്ട് മാത്രമുള്ളതായിരിക്കും, ഓപ്ഷൻ ഇല്ല. ലോട്ട് മാത്രമുള്ളതാണെങ്കിൽ ആദ്യത്തെ മാസത്തിന്റെ അവസാനം നമ്മൾ ഒരാളുടെ ലോട്ട് എടുക്കുന്നു, വില്ലിക്ക് അടിച്ചു. വില്ലിക്ക് പൈസ തരുന്നവരെ അത് പേബിൾ ആയിട്ട് കാണിക്കണമല്ലോ. ദാറ്റ്സ് എ ട്രേഡ് പേബിൾ. സാറേ, ഡെറ്റ് ക്രെഡിറ്റ് എന്നുള്ളത് ആ അർത്ഥത്തിൽ എടുക്കേണ്ടതാണ്. നമ്മൾ ഇതിന്റെ ട്രേഡ് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ചിറ്റ് പേബിൾ ആൻഡ് ചിറ്റ് റിസീവബിൾ ആണെങ്കിലോ? Okay, we'll do one thing. എളുപ്പമുള്ള കാര്യം, ഗൈഡൻസ് നോട്ട് ഫോർ ചിറ്റ് കമ്പനീസ് എന്ന സാധനം ഇവിടുന്ന് ഉണ്ടാക്കുക, എന്നിട്ട് എന്നെ പഠിപ്പിക്കുക, ഞാൻ പോയി ക്ലാസ് ഉണ്ട്. I'm not saying from the point. ഇതായിരുന്നു എന്റെ തിങ്കിങ്. Of course, that is debatable. We'll discuss here. We'll move on to the next point. We'll continue to discuss. Loan? Trade receivable in the case of an NBFC. In the case of an NBFC, it should be shown. Principal portion, yes. That's a business. Advances in the case of a bank, it has to be shown that way. Other current asset, current asset for this purpose, you have to show it as for the purpose of this. You have to show it as advance or NBFC's loan given and deposits taken. That will be equivalent to trade payable. Anyway, we'll debate. Okay, fine. Balance sheet items. Last two more points in the balance sheet. If there is a scheme of amalgamation or merger, or as I call it, business combinations, if there is a scheme, then whether all the details of the scheme have been given in the financial statements, and also whether it's in compliance with accounting standard 40. It's a reporting point, but it doesn't happen on an everyday basis. So this is a new point which has to be, which is there in not in Caro. Caro amendment rule 11 of audit and auditors rules. That towards end of the we'll discuss. Even company has to, if the company is an intermediary. I was giving this example, saying that ours is a company, private limited company in Trichur or Cochin, and you're getting some funds from a UAE company with an instruction that give this money to a Sri Lankan company, and you get some commission for that. This company has no other business. Company is not in the business of receiving or lending, etc., etc. Not a chit company. So this is just acting as a conduit connecting, because they do not want to show the direct link between the UAE. Just a hypothetical example. Countries also, just for sake of it. Then what happens is, this company, our company client in India, is just an intermediary acting as a conduit for probably a money laundering transaction, which is being siphoned out or used for some other, colored money or whatever getting converted. So in such cases, if there is there, the company has to give all the details of such where it has been received from as a share premium, investment, etc. Received, advanced, invested. Three terms I have used: advanced, loaned, and invested or received funds has to be there. This should also be completely shown. The full details I mentioned. This is the full details, so what you have to give. And of course, the last point is relevant, that if applicable, declaration of the relevant provisions of FEMA Companies Act have been duly complied with the transactions and not violative of PML Act. This much you have to give if there's a transaction of that kind is there. Again, this is not a routine point. The company's normal course of business. Angano transaction, straight transaction, that analyze in the sum. Out and number in the lip and let's just put me on the one. Time permits senior student level. Number talking too much about technology. We are leaving out details of transactions. The auditor details of transactions no company technology on computer it doesn't work that way. I think there's still a lot of charm in having a little bit of vouching done, opening balance checking done, ledger analysis done, having a copy of the trial balance. Company and the technology accounting in the basic science. Prabharan sir, Varman senior partner, Prabharan sir, Pandaka major ledger accounts in the photocopy. And the Ingi and the Varadiagan, you will not understand. You see only computer printouts. Today, printouts are also not there. Some books of accounts are printout at the Choikin, Sister Nokuno, and the backup at the major balance of pencil, put a finalize by the Ingi to stamp and the kind of photocopy to the system. Not to that extent, that's not possible now. So there's a lot of charm. What I'm trying to say is that immaterial transactions, if you do a ledger analysis, we cannot have that left out. Injetti Srinivas, who was MCA secretary just before his retirement, in an interview, he made a statement which is very shameful, damaging for the profession. You know what he said? He said, "We do not expect the auditors to see the needle in a haystack. We do not expect the auditors to see the needle in a haystack, but they should see the elephant in the room." Message is very clear. Same is a thing which Aniket Talati said, our vice president. Maybe you know that president has had a heart attack and a bypass surgery and is not active now. So Anil is there, Aniket is there everywhere. It's very young. It's a son of former president Sunil Talati, and Aniket was there. He was coming back after meeting Nirmala Sitharaman, the honorable union minister, and he attended the Vijayawada program where I was a speaker I was opening batsman for a 5-day refresher course there online. So he came online, he was in the car, he was speaking. The message was very clear. We cannot take things easily. Gone are the days where we thought we'll go scot-free. What happened in Gurgaon? Gurgaon, we are hearing only the news that the ring officers have been suspended, transferred, etc. But what is the reason for, it is not, maybe it is not as per law to detain chartered accountants. But there has been a lot of misdoings, wrongdoings. And therefore that side also, so his message was very clear. This is not my version of the story. He said, please know every member, young members particularly know that we are under the lens, we are under surveillance than ever before. Do things carefully, properly, document it. Otherwise we are in for trouble. You know, NFRA is strong now. The disciplinary mechanism, as you know, has gone out of the hands. The familiarity cases like help. When I was chairman of SIRC, I used to see a lot of disciplinary cases. Members and now it is going out of the institute's control because disciplinary committee is going to be chaired by a non-CA. Friendly influences and work out. That's the intention. And I don't know whether you heard Samla Sitaraman's response to the points MP Mario raised, Thomas Charkardanum, Britasum, raise profession regulate nothing doing. We are very clear that we'll regulate you. Education system, membership, but disciplinary mechanism, if it has to be 100% in-house, we will not allow that. Message is very clear. So I'm just sharing this. So audit process cannot be taken very passively. And since we have a lot of young members, large number of disciplinary cases are coming because of not communicating with the previous auditor. Very communicate auditor senior auditor. New member, new charter account auditor appointment letter. See, under the Companies Act 2013, the auditor is appointed for 5 years. He cannot be removed without the prior permission of the central government. And just because if he resigns, fine. Even a resignation letter, you have to be careful. You communicate with them to a senior practice. A lot of trouble. That is incidental saying this. So in all that we do, all kinds of transactions, straight transactions, regular transactions, this need not be in the back of your mind. Should not be an audit consideration for the general scrutiny that you do. But suddenly there's a payment from a completely unrelated company, which has come in and it is the same kind of amount has gone out to a completely unrelated company. Yes, then the bell rings. That is how it is. That brings us to P&L. Changes on the total revenue income. Total income. Section 8 companies in the case, a new head grants and donations received. The last point, undisclosed income, is something which is very specific. Company shall give details of any transactions not recorded in the books of accounts that has been surrendered or disclosed in tax assessments during the year. Whether such undisclosed income now recovered or discovered or assessed has been accounted properly in the books of accounts. This is a point. Illegal search of fresh assessments, search specifically. So there is a huge demand or some kind of income escaping assessment in a regular assessment also. This would trigger. That's what I feel. Some people say that it's only applicable if there's a search or Nadam Basha raid on Dangle Matram, Adil assessment Matre, block assessment back. I'm of a different view. Now, this we are discussing. So, how do we account this? Hypothetical example we discussed. For a search, okay. Assume that there is a 2 crore fixed deposit receipt in the name of the company. Search is a kind of okay. This 2 crores FD in the name, very hypothetical example. So how do we account for this? Account is auditor true and fair, it's belonging to the company. Company FDR, this has to be brought in the books of account. So Palatan discuss FD account debtor 2 crores to provision for taxation, ease of calculation, provision for taxation 1.2 crores, 0.8 crores will go into revenue. So, capital reserve is debatable. Capital reserve is revenue. Currently, revenue. I'm of the view that this should go to revenue. Prior period ആയിട്ട് വേണമെങ്കിൽ കാണിക്കാം. Prior period പറയുന്ന mistakes and omissions are. So if thank you. ഇതാണ് അക്കൗണ്ടിങ് എൻട്രി. ക്യാപിറ്റൽ റിസർവ് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ റിസർവ് ആണ് ശരിക്കും. അത് റവന്യൂ തന്നെയല്ല. അത് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ റിസർവ് അല്ലേ? ക്യാപിറ്റൽ റിസർവ് അല്ല. അതിനകത്ത് ക്യാപിറ്റൽ നേച്ചറിലല്ലോ. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും. After tax provisions made, you can pay dividend. So it is that from out of the concealed income probably that you would have developed this, accumulated this asset. Or an ആധാരം വന്നിരിക്കും. കമ്പനിയുടെ പേരിൽ ഒരു പ്രോപ്പർട്ടി ആധാരമാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അത് naturally it has to be accounted for as the income ആണെന്നുള്ളതാണ്. So the point here, the company ഇതൊന്നുമില്ലെങ്കിൽ പറയണം, ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ such and such this has been assessed etc. and this has been brought into the books of accounts as per the accepted accounting principles. Such a note will have to be given. CSR is a last but one point. Okay. Okay. CSR point CSR came in as a very friendly section 135. ഇന്നിപ്പോ ഭയങ്കര ഒരു പ്രശ്നമല്ല. CSR കൊണ്ട് ഒത്തിരി നല്ല കാര്യങ്ങൾ നടക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. But today CSR is mandatory in the sense that non-compliance penalty ഉണ്ട്. The unspent amount has to be accounted for. തൃശ്ശൂരും ഒന്നും അധികം കമ്പനികൾ, ലിസ്റ്റഡ് കമ്പനീസ് ഉണ്ട്, ലാർജർ കമ്പനീസ് ഉണ്ട്. ടേൺ ഓവർ ബേസ് 5 crores കൂടുതൽ പ്രോഫിറ്റ് ആണെങ്കിൽ then CSR പ്രൊവിഷൻ സർട്ടിഫിക്കറ്റ് 3 ക്ലോസസ് ഉണ്ടല്ലോ. ടേൺ ഓവർ, നെറ്റ് വർത്ത് ആൻഡ് പ്രോഫിറ്റ്. നെറ്റ് പ്രോഫിറ്റ് 5 crores കൂടുതലാണെങ്കിൽ CSR 135 is attracted. അപ്പൊ CSRലേക്ക് അടുത്ത പോയിന്റ് വരും. കാരോയിൽ വലിയ റിപ്പോർട്ടിംഗ് റിക്വയർമെന്റ് ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പോ amount required to be spent during the year, that is 2% of the average net profits of the immediately preceding 3 years. Amount of expenditure actually incurred, shortfall at the end of the year, total previous year's shortfall, reasons for shortfall, nature of CSR activities undertaken. Schedule 7 lana the eligible CSR activities. 135 has to be always read with Schedule 7 to the company. Details of related party transactions. What happens is the company might float its own trust. For Muthoot Papachan Group, they have Muthoot Papachan Foundation. So we had a discussion there. They are planning to set up a huge sports facility close to beyond Trichurana. And above the CSR sports, Paralympic and normal sports, all that is allowed under CSR. So sports development, all those things. About our case, a contribution, how much is that has been routed through companies on this thing, or you have probably given to an NGO, contributed to a fund, Prime Minister's Relief Fund, etc. Where a provision is made with respect to liability incurred, the movement in the provision during the year should be shown separate. Opening provision under, closing provision under, what is the movement? Payouts out of that provision. Provisions because unspent amount on that has to be provided for. And unfortunately, every one of you know, there is no tax deduction for CSR expenditure. So all that has to be added back. And there will not be any DTL effect also because it's a permanent difference, not a timing difference. This is the last point under Schedule 3, profit and loss of cryptocurrency. Market crash, cryptos crash. So virtual, the new term they have used, Madam has used is VDA, virtual digital assets. Getting taxed at 30%. Budget 22, 30% taxes on profit on crypto transactions. But then the crypto guy said, oh, this is now legal. Madam made it very clear that taxing doesn't mean that we are giving any legal validity to crypto transactions. There's no regulator. RBI has not started. So that's a very tricky situation today. A lot of people are investing. Some have lost money. Some are on paper making money. Exit. So all the profit loss on cryptocurrency and virtual this thing, amount of currency held as on reporting date, deposit advance from any person for the purpose of trading and investing. We are getting money and then we are trading on behalf of someone, that also should be given. That's a crypto story. So these are the points under Schedule 3. The next one is on Caro. But just because Caro, you will just take math, interesting math. Crypto. IPL cricket football. I was a footballer. I was captain of the school team. Football and I was a football player. I was a left-in forward. Left-in forward again. So IPL this time, I think we had 79 matches altogether. So IPL advertisements is Tata Steel, ടാറ്റ IPL ആയിരുന്നു. ടാറ്റ ന്യൂ അവർ അഡ്വർടൈസ് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പഴയമാതിരിയുള്ള വാഷിംഗ് പൗഡർ നിർമ്മയും സർഫൊന്നും അല്ല. ഇപ്രാവശ്യം ഏറ്റവും കൂടുതൽ അഡ്വർടൈസ്മെന്റ് വന്നിരുന്ന ഒരു കമ്പനിയാണ് ഡ്രീം 11. Dream 11 was a catch baseline. അതിൽ they were featuring ബുംറ, ഋഷഭ് പന്ത് and all that. അത് പിള്ളേർ സൈക്കിളിൽ പോയി കളിച്ച കാലം ഡ്രീം ബിഗ് ആൻഡ് ഡ്രീം 11. Similarly, all the crypto exchanges, maximum advertise the crypto exchanges. Now, Dream 11 ഒരു മാറ്റം വന്നെ. എൻ്റെ ഒരു കസിൻ്റെ ഹസ്ബൻഡ്, ബ്രദറിലോ എന്ന് പറയാം, ഫസ്റ്റ് കസിൻ്റെ ഹസ്ബൻഡ്, he had a health problem, he was undergoing a treatment in അമൃത. അപ്പൊ അയാള് IPL അഡിക്റ്റാ. അപ്പൊ എന്നെ സ്ക്രീൻ കാണിച്ചു, ഡ്രീം 11 ആണ്. ഒരു ദിവസം പുള്ളി ലോഗിൻ ചെയ്തിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ഒരു പർട്ടിക്കുലർ ഉള്ളൂ, who will win the match? That is Rajasthan Royals or Gujarat Titans അല്ലേ, who won the match? Final അല്ലേ? This is one particular. 49 രൂപയാണ് അതിനകത്ത് എൻട്രിക്കുള്ള ബേസിക് ഫീസ്. So you pay 49 rupees and then you log in to that particular this thing. ആ particular ഡേയിലെ നമ്പർ ഓഫ് ലോഗിൻസ് 92,48,000 rupees. സോ ഒരു ദിവസത്തെ ഡ്രീം 11ന്റെ ക്യാഷ് റവന്യൂ 45,32,00,000 രൂപ അപ്രോക്സ്. ആൻഡ് ദ പ്രൈസ് പേ ഔട്ട് ഇസ് 32 crores. അപ്പം ക്യാഷ് പ്രോഫിറ്റ് 13 കോടി രൂപ. അതിൽ നിന്നാണ് അവര് ബാക്കിയുള്ള അഡ്വർടൈസ്മെന്റ്സും കാര്യങ്ങളും ചെയ്യുന്നത്. There was a huge this thing that this is gambling, so this should be prohibited എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. They hired the best lawyers in the country, paid them maybe crores of rupees, and finally they said this is a game of intelligent game, game of what did they say, game of chance alla, were a term they use, game of thing, and therefore it is not gambling. And ഇതാണ് സംഭവം. ഓരോരോ പുതിയ ബിസിനസ് മോഡൽസ് വരുന്ന സംഭവം ക്രിപ്റ്റോയുടെ. ആൻഡ് ഹൂ ഇസ് ദ ഹാപ്പിയസ്റ്റ് പേഴ്സൺ? മാഡം വിൽ ഗെറ്റ് അടുത്ത മാസം 7ാം തീയതി 10 കോടി രൂപ അക്കൗണ്ട് വീഴുക. ക്യാഷ് ഇൻകം ഇസ് ടാക്സ്, TDS is 30%, റൈറ്റ്? ഇതാണ് പുതിയ മാതകൾ. ഇൻട്രസ്റ്റിംഗ്. ജസ്റ്റ് ഐ തോട്ട് ഐ ഷെയർ വിത്ത് യു. ഐ വാസ് റിയലി സർപ്രൈസ്ഡ്. ആൻഡ് വാട്ട് വുഡ് ബി ദ വാല്യുവേഷൻ ഓഫ് Game 11 now as a company? It will not be like Zomato. There's no business in food delivery. World over, there's no food delivery business is profitable. But Zomato had a 9,900 crores issue subscribed. That was a market frenzy, like C. Rangarajan said. Market is driven by sentiment, liquidity. പുതിയ പിള്ളേരുടെ കയ്യിലൊക്കെ വർക്ക് ഫ്രം ഹോം ആയിട്ട് ഇഷ്ടം പോലെ പൈസയാണ്. അതാണ് സംഭവം. I'm not saying from the point. So this is a model, and they are into pro kabaddi, pro volley, എല്ലാത്തിലും ഉണ്ട്. So this is one this thing which I said. Okay, but numbers may not be as high as in cricket. So with that, fresh insights, some questions unanswered. Chitti particularly, we will move to Caro 2020. ഒരു നിങ്ങളുടെ തീർത്തേക്കല്ലേ, മടുത്തോ? ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു February 2020 നോട്ടിഫൈ ചെയ്താ 1920 വരുമെന്ന് പേടിച്ചു. അപ്പൊ പറഞ്ഞു, ഇൻഡസ്ട്രി പറഞ്ഞു, ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂട്ടും പറഞ്ഞു, ആരും റെഡി ആയിട്ടില്ല. 2021 പോയി. ഫൈനലി 21-22 it has been made applicable. Overview of the order. അജിത്ത് എന്തോ പറഞ്ഞു, 7 നമ്പർ അജിത്ത് എന്തോ പറഞ്ഞു, ഞാൻ ഓർക്കുന്നു. ന്യൂ ക്ലോസസ് ഇൻക്ലൂഡിംഗ് 2 ഇൻട്രൊഡ്യൂസ് 7, modified clauses 7, retained clauses 7, totally 21 clauses and 47 sub clauses. This is the overall structure of Caro 2020. One point under the managerial remuneration compliance with 197, that has been dropped. Summary of changes. We will mainly discuss the first 2 columns. Transactions not recorded in the books of account. Capital reserve, revenue reserve. They are okay. Ability of the company to meet its liabilities. This is a tricky issue. This is ആരോ പറഞ്ഞ ഇനിയിപ്പം സിയുടെ സിലബസിൽ ജ്യോതിഷം, അസ്ട്രോളജിയും കൂടെ ചേർക്കും. മുഖം നോക്കി ഭാവി പറയും. ഇത് ബുക്ക് നോക്കി ഭാവി പറയണം കമ്പനിയുടെ. പഴയൊരു തമാശയുണ്ട്. കൈനോട്ട കാര്യങ്ങൾ നോക്കിയിട്ട് മുഖത്ത് ഹനുമാൻ ഭക്തനാണല്ലേ, എങ്ങനെ മനസ്സിലായി? ആ മുഖത്തേക്ക് നോക്കിയാൽ മതിയല്ലെന്നാണ്. സോ അസ്ട്രോളജി പഠിക്കണം. Ability, I'll come to that point. CSR already പറഞ്ഞു, പക്ഷേ auditor's responsibility, whether this company has actually complied with 135(5) and 135(6) will come to that. Statutory audit resignation ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ you have to be the new incoming auditor has to report, interact with that outgoing or resigned auditor and see whether the provisions have been, what are his concerns, why did we resign, etc. Consolidated auditor, consolidated financial statements in the auditor, subsidiaries in them, associates in them, Caro points in the that he should refer to that. Internal audit system has been reintroduced with the new clause. Cash loss has been reintroduced from Caro 2003. So these are the new clauses. We'll discuss that Oro clause of the discuss here, plus fixed assets. Now, before that, we have to look at the applicability also. Applicable from 21-22, financial year starting from 1st April 21. Every company, including a foreign company, as defined in section 242 of the Companies Act. Government company, branches. The branches are big, remote branches are audited by some other auditor. You should also comply with the Caro. Not applicable to banking, insurance, section 8 company, one-person company, small company, and some private companies. We need to discuss a small company definition, 285, that had undergone 2 changes. Recent changes on the monetary limits. A small company means a private limited company whose paid up capital does not exceed 2 crores. 50 lakhs has been enhanced 2 crores. And is very important, I'll tell you why. And turnover as per the latest audit accounts does not exceed 20 crores. It was 2 crores earlier. Or such other sum as may be prescribed. Now the prescription is 2 crores of paid up capital, 20 crores of turnover. And because original definition or and it should be cumulatively satisfied. Neither your paid up capital exceeds 2 crores nor your turnover exceeds 20 crores. The definition of a small company. Private companies are subject to exemption. Now look at this footnote. Small company under the Act shall be exempt even if it falls under any other eligible category. There's a feeling that if that is the case, then this exemption is redundant. You're already a private small company, is not by virtue of leave out borrowings, turnover criteria, turnover 20 crores. 2 crores. So paid up capital and reserves and surplus, of course, there. But small company definition paid up capital. So there is redundancy on the thinking on that it is not required there, but this is for our understanding, and it should not be a subsidiary or holding of a public company. If that is the case, irrespective of this thing, it will become applicable. Otherwise, these are the exemptions. Paid up capital will include equity and preference shares and shares forfeited, but does not include unpaid calls and share application money. Share application money, one has to be careful. Now the new requirement is that shares should be allotted within 60 days. Otherwise, refunded 15 days more. So totally we have 75 days. Failing which there's a non-compliance and it cannot be shown as share application money, it should be shifted to current liabilities. Reserves and surplus includes capital reserve, revenue reserves, including revaluation reserves. And it should be any debit balance in the P&L has to be reduced. P&L debit balance, reserves and surplus bracketed. We'll get it everything in the note number 2. Share capital note. Schedule the note. Clause number 1, internal audit. Whether the company has an internal audit system commensurate with the size of the company and nature of its business. The reintroduced from 2003, but there's an additional clause where the reports of the internal auditors for the period under audit were considered by the statutory audit. Internal audit, internal department checking account. Report then finally we say that there is internal audit system in vogue which requires improvement, etc. Whether the reports of the internal auditors for the period has been considered by the auditor. So there has to be a report in the first place of internal auditors. Recently state public sector undertaking finalized. We are the statutory auditor, CNDG. Babu sir is internal auditor. Babu sir had done first 3 quarters. 4th quarter was in progress. Finally May 1st week finalized. Out on the 4th quarter, younger cabin statutory auditors, internal auditors. Finally, we asked for a draft report of quarter 4. Looked at the reports of the first 3 quarters, signed the final reports, and then based on that, we said yes, this has been complied, or said that we have considered and gone through the reports. Document bulky and documentation styles are also changing today. Photocopy, hard copy, we get the scanned versions. That's how documentation is happening. Today, if you call a student for finalization and ask for where are the legis scrutiny notes, client folder LS. And folder subfolder on LS. Other trial balance analysis, trial balance Excel on the side of the comments, highlight disposal of the days of the thick box files, I think we should really reduce. It is more effective also. Provided you have proper backup. Cash loss, nothing much to be explained. Whether the company has incurred cash loss in the financial year and immediately preceding financial year, it's a clause that has been reintroduced. This we have discussed. The auditor also has to say, common point and schedule 3 to be discussed, so we can go faster here. Whether any unrecorded income has been detected and assessed, etc., whether that has been properly booked in, brought into the a Caro report which I have shared has all the clauses there. It has to be customized. In the covering note I had mentioned, user discretion recommended, plus it may be customized. It's a broad framework or structure of the report which I have shared. Resignation, whether there has been resignation of the statutory auditors during the year. If yes, whether the auditor has taken into account the issues, objections, concerns raised by the outgoing auditors. Document is the version, concerns raised by the outgoing auditor, include specifically in the MRL, management representation letter, all the material concerns discussed with them. Some of you have been following the macro aspects through newspapers or whatever. 1920, India incorporated so large number of audit resignations. One which I distinctly remember was PricewaterhouseCoopers stepping down from Reliance Infocom, Anil Ambani Group Company, ADAG. And the reason cited was we are resigning as auditors because I taught auditing at the ERNAKULAM branch for 20 long years. The auditing class, the auditor should obtain sufficient appropriate evidence. Sufficient means quantity. Appropriate means relevant, quality, relevance, etc. So they said because we are resigning because we're not able to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to form an opinion on the financial statement. They resigned. Reasons had to be given. MCA was taking it seriously, then they were sending notice, etc. But if such a thing has happened, then you should hear the auditor's version as well as the management's version of the story, documented properly, and then based on that, you have to report. Yeah, this is the point. On the basis of the financial ratios. Ratios are there in the financial statements, which we ourselves would have prepared. Aging and expected dates of realization of financial assets, liabilities, discussion with the management's plans, etc., we have to discuss, and whether the audit is of the opinion that no material uncertainty exists as on the date of the audit report, and the company is able to pay its liabilities existing on the balance sheet date, as and when they fall due within 1 year. So, one varshataikulla projection madi. Indefinite bhavi venda. Bhudam, varthamanam, bhavi oru varshathekku. 12 maasam, balance sheet 12 maasathekku, company will be able to pay its liabilities based on the financial ratios, etc. Avadeyana current ratio യും ബാക്കിയുള്ള കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ relevant ആയിട്ട് വരുന്നത്. കുറിക്കാര്യം പറയല്ലേ please. This is quite demanding. Documentation has to be done properly. Realizability of debtors, financial assets, all those things you have to be done. And board's review of financial position. How is that a resort? Or again, tourism industry, we have a lot of tourism, clients in the tourism industry that they're able to pull on. And then what is that liabilities falling due, whether they'll be able to pay, or defaults are likely to happen. Liquidity crunch is, so much of liquidity crunch is there. Have to assess the business plans, etc. And based on that, left report. Difficult and include specifically all those things in the MRL. What I'm saying is material events, paying capacity. Company, if his company is able to say that bring in fresh equity, for example, you're able to find an investor. A lot of investments happening in sector. Then there's no liquidity crisis. Additional equity is coming in. Then you can say that yes. But a negative report, otherwise one has to be very careful. The transfer of unspent CSR amounts. CSR applicable. 2 years back, Federal Bank failed, rather did not comply fully with the requirement. And there's a shortage of a few crores, and the MCA reprimanded Federal Bank, and that had to be given in the board's report. 1920 Federal Bank in the annual report. And they had to mention that. So this essentially shames the corporate, saying that we should have spent 50 crores, we spent only 40 crores. MCA chart over in the current situation. That's the intention. But today it's slightly different. These two paragraphs has to be seen. I think we'll take the first one, second paragraph first. Ongoing project. Ongoing CSR project is a project, it's a multi-year project, which will transcend for more than 1 year, but not more than 3 years. By definition, are 3 years in only spend. What happens is you embark on a project, let us say in Jan 22, March 22, I have 3 maso. 2 crore spend 50 lakhs spend. Baki 1.5 crores for ongoing projects. What's the CSR responsibility? What's the CSR obligation? 1.5 crores is unspent. Okay. But what is that project? It's an ongoing project which will be completed 22, 23, 23, 24. In such situation, you should put that in a special bank account within 30 days. Has been transferred to special account in compliance with 135.6. Yeah. Within 30 days, that has to happen. I hope I made the point clear. Ongoing project, unspent amount on 31st March determined within 1 month, it has to be parked in a separate bank account. Number capital gains account scheme. Other than ongoing projects, what we decide we will spend this year itself. 21-22 financial year spend Other spend within 6 months, it should be transferred to any of the funds mentioned in Schedule 7. It's like IEPF transfer. These are the two things. One is 135.5 and 135.6. Applicable at and unspent amount has to be provided for. Liability created. That has to be there. CSR as active in KMA. Now I'm only an MC. KMA. We did something called a CSR conclave. Many of the corporates, they're not getting validated CSR projects to spend. Well-meaning NGOs on the fund side CSR obligation spend and Bembel mandatorily compulsion company were side very JOMON service in NGOs. So we did this and we brought it as a platform. Samuma projects we could tie up, and because KMA could do some validation, corporates had an extra confidence in sharing or spending funds with them, and validation of the CSR, incidentally, many of us work with trusts and NGOs. Regional Sports Center, KMA, and Rotary Trust. Involved. Last year, we got all of them registered with the MCA. I hope you know about it. CSR one on form. So if I'm an NGO or a trust, I should have 12-year registration, I should have 8-year registration, and 3 years of existence. Then I am eligible to receive CSR funds. Okay, CSR funds. For that, you should be registered with the ministry. CSR one on form file. We did office in a partner, we got it registered. Rotary Trust plus a regional sports center of Rajiv Gandhi Indoor Stadium, where I'm serving as treasurer for the last 2 years. Then KMA, of course, something which by eligibility you should be in the database of the MCA. Oh, a lot of online and chat box question. Oh, we were very sad that no one is attending the audio problem. Oh, chat box. Oh my God, no audio. Request. Cheda. Okay. The questions only audio problem. Okay, right. I hope this is clear. We'll move to the next slide. Caro remarks we did mention in the consolidated financial statements indicate the details of companies and the paragraph numbers of Caro report containing qualifications or adverse remarks. This to be done by the CSA, Central Statutory Auditor, or the consolidated financial main auditor, chief auditor. Consolidated report Caro venda. Caro points the auditor has to highlight. But imagine a situation like Vodafone, Shantamar Sano Krishnan. Vodafone, where Indian company was 5th or 6th level subsidiary under the company, said how this could be addressed. Maybe it's a violation. Alangil 100% subsidiary. Shantamar sir is there. It is possible that I did mention if it's 100% subsidiaries, you can have as many levels as possible. In the example which I gave, A, B, and C, it should stop with C. A B 100% subsidiary, then C D. So if you had 5-6 subsidiaries and at the 100% subsidiary, they could still do that. Where there have been qualification adverse remarks in auditors of Caro reports, the companies included CFS in a Caro vende. Company specific, but then CFS consolidated Caro venda. What is the point? What is the general view? CFS in a Caro, I'm not able to quickly recall. Recently consolidated Jaditla. Vipin Parna is the main body of the report. This close. Okay, that remains a loose end. Other Anubin point, the Caro is not applicable for a consolidated CFS. So this will come as a separate point under maybe other regulatory requirements and do it. Okay, that is eye-opening. I'll double check and see what probably I'll send a mail to what the guidance note says. Guidance note the quick reading point. Thank you for that. Fixed asset. So we have completed the new 7 clauses which have been including the two newly reintroduced clauses on cash flows and internal audit. Now, modified clause, the modification, what's new is fixed asset schedule tangible assets in the schedule. Now we have to report whether the quantitative details and full details of intangible assets have also been maintained by the company. So in the case of tangible assets, we are saying that whichever requires to be updated. The company is maintaining record which requires to be updated. Same point may continue here. But then informed reporting is that companies should keep full records of purchased intangibles as well as self-developed, internally generated intangibles also. That's possible. The first part is there. Second part is again the not held in the name of the company. We have discussed the same format the auditor has to give. If immobile properties are not held in the name of the company, then the full details, like we had seen, what is it, in whose name it is held, the reason for not holding in the name of the company, for how long it has been so held, that has to be given. First clause already allowed. In the case of a revalued property, yes, then it is here whether it's by a registered valuer, and if change is more than 10% in the aggregate, the net carrying value of each class of property, then the auditor has to give details of that. 10% of either upward valuation or downward revaluation of more than 10% of the net carrying value at the beginning of the year, then it has to be reported by the auditor. Benami transactions, again, I repeat from Schedule 3. If there are transactions, the auditor should also clearly mention. And then we'll say that there is no pending or no penalty, no proceedings have been initiated against the company or pending against the company under this Benami Transactions Provision Act. Undangle full details. Here is something which is relating to inventory. We did discuss about the inventory in Schedule 3. Here, look at the 2 points, which the key point, new in the article, the coverage and procedure for verification. The coverage and procedure for verification of inventory is all right. This is a key point which is new. Now the question is how many of us are able to attend or rather intend or bother to attend inventory verification, even in cases where there's high value crores and crores of inventories. Many of us are happy with an Excel sheet signed by the accountant or unsigned email statement from our accountant saying that this is the year-end inventory. This throwing up a challenge there where we have to report on the coverage and procedure. I would like to invite attention to SA 501, Standards on Auditing 501. SA 580 written representation. One thing everyone should be clear, that SAs are now mandatory under the Companies Act. 2013 Act, it was only an institute's instruction on the members. Look here, CA, if you do not do audits in accordance with the standards on auditing, earlier I had AAS, Adim SAP, Standard Auditing Practices. Pinne ASI, AAS, Auditing and Assurance Standards. Pudhiya classification, Standards on Auditing. Engagement standards in 4 classification: standards on auditing, standard on review engagements, standard on assurance engagements, standards on related service. Standards on auditing mandatory, because Companies Act, Chapter 10, Audit and Auditors, Section 143 is the most important section. Powers and duties of auditors and auditing standards, captured in auditing standards. And 143.9 says that every auditor, not every company, not every board, every director, every auditor shall comply with auditing standards. For managing committee, standards auditing and program which are in so Sarna branch income tax latest developments. GST recent judicial decision. But compliance is still very poor. But one has to be extremely careful. Because the NFR MCI whether the auditors have you done the audit properly? It's a very impersonal question they would ask. Yes, sir. Have you done it in compliance with standards on auditing? No, maybe no is not an answer there. So here, SA 501 talks about special considerations for specific items. SA 500 is a standard on evidence, audit evidence, SA 500. It says about sufficient appropriate evidence, how to collect, document, all that. That's the offshoot is 501. 501 is the first item. The auditor should physically oversee, supervise inventory verification. Or need not be at the year end, need not be 10 times a year, need not be by the senior auditor himself, audit assistants. It has to be done. That's the point. Without this, without doing that, we may not be able to say that coverage and procedure. Management, ചോദിച്ചാൽ പ്രസാദ് ഞങ്ങൾ മിക്കവാറും എല്ലാ ആഴ്ചയും തന്നെ സ്റ്റോക്ക് വെരിഫൈ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട് സാർ. ഓ ശരി, എല്ലാ ആഴ്ചയും ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. അത്രയൊന്നും വേണ്ട. റിപ്പോർട്ട് വല്ലതും ഉണ്ടോ? റിപ്പോർട്ടില്ല സാർ. ഇതിന്റെ എല്ലാം ശരിയായിട്ടാണ് പോകാൻ. റിപ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യാനൊന്നുമില്ല, ഒരു പോയിന്റ് ഇല്ല. ഇങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാണ് സംഭവിക്കുക. But that stage has to go. During COVID time, company എല്ലാവർക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ അറിയാം, നമ്മുടെ Indigo Paints taken over a company, Hibil Coatings പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് നമ്മുടെ റോട്ടറിയുള്ള നാരായണൻകുട്ടി സാർ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ അദ്ദേഹത്തിന്റെ കമ്പനിയാണ്. That is part of Indigo now. Kalamasheri unit. So he called up and said, asked whether you can do a physical verification for EY. I'm just sharing this. EY Pune was doing the Indigo Paints. Listed company, share was ruling very high. I don't know what the status is now. Very focused company, very aggressive management and all that. Horizontal growth this is a well-managed company. Kutti sir is an IITIM. Company take over. So EY ഞങ്ങളെ വിളിച്ചു, ഞങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യാമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു, ഫീസൊക്കെ അഗ്രി ചെയ്തു, ക്രെഡിറ്റ് ഇല്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു, അഗ്രി ചെയ്യാമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അവരുടെ ഐഡിയ അനുസരിച്ചാൽ EY പറഞ്ഞ ഡീറ്റെയിൽ ലിസ്റ്റ് ഒക്കെ അയച്ചു. The first thing my team had to do is partner and the students have to take a photograph, group feed in front of the factory and send it to them. And the entire process was live video streamed. They had put a senior audit assistant in there sitting in front of the computer, seeing what they are doing. The 10 items of raw materials and 10 items of finished goods were there. Now randomly we are not giving any instruction. Apart from the items we give randomly you take 5 items of RM and finished goods and do it and report. This also today you don't have to, maybe you don't have to physically go, you can either outsource or lesser junior teams you become, and people have started saying, I've not experienced. Drones have started doing physical verification if things are kept in such a situation. Technology has a lot of methods of doing it. But then the point here is, reporting point is whether the coverage and procedure of the management for verification of inventory is sufficient and proper. And 10% kodalla 10% avade limit kondunnu, or not all the discrepancies. If there is a discrepancy of 10% or more in the aggregate in each class of inventory we have noticed, that should be materiality, less than 10% anengil vendannilla. Yeah, this is the other point which we discussed. Shajana, 5 crores. In Schedule 3, irrespective of the working capital limits, these details have to be given. Comparing quarterly returns filed with the bank with books of accounts. Here, if the company has been sanctioned working capital limits in excess of 5 crores in the aggregate, then the auditor has to report the same thing. Whether quarterly returns filed are in agreement with the books of accounts, sundry debtor, receivables, and of course inventory also. I wanted to take a stand. I don't know if it's a constructive interpretation saying that this clause will apply only if a limit of more than 5 crores sanctioned during the year. So Coimbatore residential, Munnar, some of the senior members said that may not be very safe. A sanction is just renewed actually. Every year these limits are. Renewal should also be seen as a fresh sanction, and that's a better interpretation. I agree that is better wisdom than slicing it off. So that's the interpretation which is happening now. We have to, the methodologies we have seen slightly difficult, and the question as to whether what the management give is genuine or not. If there are reasons to smell something bad, then you can go to the banker and then get the copies done and try compare. Loans modified clause ആണ് കുറേ പുതിയ points കൊണ്ടുവന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്, whether loans have been given by the company. Here again, not applicable to NBFCs where principal business is that of giving loans. New point is the aggregate amount of balance outstanding to subsidiaries, joint ventures, and associates has to be given specifically, other than subsidiaries and joint ventures separately. This is the first thing which they have brought in. Whether the such loans given are prejudicial to the interest of the company, not prejudicial to the interest of the auditor should say that they are not prejudicial to the interest of the company. If it's prejudicial, they should say that rate of a company is borrowing at, let's say, 15% and giving to a subsidiary at 5% or 6%, naturally prejudicial company. An interest-free loan to a relative of a director is being given, prejudicial to the interest of the company. Loan, this is the starting point is not applicable to companies whose principal business is to give loans. What is your point? Is applicable? No, that is what I put in red letters. And the other one is whether repayment is regular as extra, etc. But look at the point D, where they have brought in the IRAC norms also here. 90 days close. Whether if it's more outstanding for more than 90 days, whether reasonable steps have been taken by the management. So reasonable steps, the question is whether it should be the point here. Yeah, past due reporting. Reasonable steps need not mean that you have to take legal action. Payment is not forthcoming, so you send a notice, some communication, email communication, initiated a process of recovery saying that you are in default, you're kind of becoming an NPA or become an NPA and start repaying like the banks do. And then after that, if there is repeated failure, then legal action can also, but need not be to report on whether reasonable action has been taken for recovery. It need not essentially be a legal action. That's the point I was trying to drive home. Another point is banking evergreening, whether fresh loans have been sanctioned to repay, take a new loan so that its outstanding sinking loan will get repaid. But to the same party with all the inherent problems they have, they'll issue a fresh sanction and then that will be, that's the first point. Based on that, all the irregular balances would be reclosed. Banking, bank audit level, evergreening on the level. Yeah. Whether again loans and advances are demand either or repayable on demand without specifying terms and conditions, then the aggregate amount which has been given to promoters related parties. This can happen in many cases. This has to be reported by the auditor, but that's a new clause. So auditors report a word format of three tabulations. Already we have. I once happened to see the annual report of auditors report of Tata Steel about me statutory dues. Disputed, undisputed statutory is running into 5-6 pages, running into crores and crores of rupees. Status duty, all the excise duty cases, service tax cases, all those things that has to be given. Whether the company has defaulted in repayment of loans, this is there, but here the new point is what we had discussed earlier. whether the company has been declared a willful defaulter. That's only new clause. Baki modification and whether they have been taken for purposes obtained, it was already there. And this is reintroduced. The last point, sorry, second point, third point is reintroduced. Whether funds raised on short-term basis have been used for long-term application. Originally, Caro 2003, if you remember, they had a clause or vice versa, which was redundant and they took it off. Because some part of the long-term funds will always be used for short-term applications, working capital, margin on working capital concept. But then no pie out of the short-term funds can be utilized for long-term applications. I remember one of our clients and the earlier formula. Unfortunately for him, his working capital limits got sanctioned very early. Term loan sanction. He started drawing it. There's a cost overrun. Cost overrun, Ashan other working capital machinery further inaugurate inaugurate some raw material. It's a vicious circle using short-term funds for long-term applications. So that is something which has been very careful. So that has been reintroduced, and purposes for which they have been taken has also been reintroduced. Here, the point on whether they have taken it for use of subsidiaries, just taken some amount and just for giving it to subsidiaries, associates, joint ventures, it has to be given. And also the second point is whether the company has taken loans on the basis of pledge of securities, holdings in subsidiaries, associates, etc. That's also not advisable. Investments in them has to be intact. They should not be encumbered. That is a point which has to be there. It can also happen that there could be substantial reduction, loss happening in the subsidiaries as well as joint ventures. And the value would deplete, and then this liability would come on this company because they would have governed that, and the loanee is this company. The security is only the shares of that company. So there's a value depletion, that risk is there. That is the point they're trying to drive home. Modified clause 5, reporting of frauds. Already is there, 143.12. And the new point is whether 143.12, in that it requires normal frauds or small value frauds needs to be reported only to the board. But if the amount involved is more than 1 crore, the auditor should report to the central government, not the company. The auditor should further report to the central government. Form prescribed is ADT 4. In such cases, whether that has been done, the statutory auditor has to report in the Caro. And whistleblower complaints we had seen there. If any of the whistleblower complaints have been there during the year, the company has received, the auditor has considered, because a whistleblower complaint can have a lot of implications on accounting and auditing. The very going concern or the substratum, the subject or the life of the company may be in this, a huge non-compliance which can kill the company. Or there's a complete stoppage, there's a new ecological law saying that a license is not able to be renewed, a mining license. So that can be a whistleblower complaint, and therefore one has to take it objectively and report. Nidhi company, Parano. Nidhi company, ividulla points are simple. Net on funds 1:20 maintained. Second point is 10% of unencumbered deposits to meet the deposit liabilities. And whether there has been new point is whether there has been any default in payment of interest on deposits or repayment thereof for any period, and if so, the details thereof. Nidhi companies on the license NDH 4 issues still continue. MCA registrar, when he had come for our Kochi program, we had discussion with him. He said the ministry is taking it very, very seriously because Nidhi company by definition more than 200 members within members only, but many of them are going way out and then beyond to non-members. I know what's the difficulty in making members. I'm again not an expert. So Registrar was saying that that will continue for some time. We are disciplining them. That's the way he said. I don't know whether there has been further progress. NDH for 5 okay. That's a stoppage is what the stoppage of business what they are intending. Okay. Now the reporting requirements here are specific as far as the company is concerned. Now NBFCs in a case, this is clause is already there. Whether the company is required to be registered under RBI as with under what 45A of the RBI Act. New points they have brought in. Some of the points is whether the company has conducted NBFC business without getting valid certificate of registration from Reserve Bank of India. This may be very relevant in question. So one of the things which the guidance note says here, whether it has done NBFC business, one of the criteria they're mentioning is, look at the last point, examine the financial statements to ascertain if the company's financial assets constitute more than 50% of the total assets, and revenue from financial assets constitute more than 50%, it is kind of deemed to have carried on NBFC business, and that requires registration with the RBI. That is an inference, or that is a point which they are guiding us with. Core investment company, I don't think it's a very common thing here. Core investment company by definition is a company with more than 100 crores of paid up capital, mainly into the business of investing in companies, forming subsidiaries, etc., etc. The reporting requirement is whether the company is a CIC as defined under the regulations, and if so, whether it continues to fulfill the criteria of a CIC, and in case company is exempted or unregistered CIC, but continues to fulfill such criteria. I'm not able to explain full because we do not have any hands-on experience on a core investment company. But if it is there, this is by virtue of it registered as a CIC with the RBI. That classification, if it has taken, this point will be triggered. And I don't know whether that second point is how it is relevant at all. Whether the group has more than one CIC as part of the group, if he has a number of CICs in the group. We are doing the audit of particular CIC. Our group I don't know, like the auditor's disqualification, if you see, it will be very difficult to determine whether any of our relatives are holding shares in that particular company. Okay. As you have seen, with that, we've come to the end of Caro. The UAE Sri Lanka example which I had mentioned, but that's thanks to Vipin. They said I went unnoticed. Vipin is a change on but luckily it was before the start of the audit season. We didn't miss out. So this will not be part of Caro. This has to be reported under that subhead called other legal and regulatory requirements. Two clauses we have to add. Whether that kind of, you recall the example, no? Unrelated receipt of funds, something like a money laundering activity from somebody, a foreign entity, local entity, HNI, individual, with an instruction that you give it to somebody else on my behalf or whatever, that has to be specifically looked into and reported. Sir. അതിനുള്ള ക്ലോസ് ആണ്. അപ്പൊ എല്ലാ കമ്പനിയിലും നമ്മൾ നോക്കണം. I think in the draft report, which but I think I've given a full report. We'll share. No problem. And here, what is the question? Whether the management is represented. How will the management represent? Through the MRL. So MRL every witness receive MRL additional point. So I had shared the MRL also. Lot of it can further be expanded. പുതിയ പോയിന്റ് എല്ലാം നമ്മൾ പുതിയ ലെറ്റർ ഓഫ് റെപ്രസെന്റേഷൻ കയറ്റിയെടുക്കുക SFI മേടിക്കുന്നുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ, പക്ഷെ മേടിക്കുന്നില്ലെങ്കിൽ 100% requesting you, please start. It's only a one-time exercise. Get it from at least major clients where there are transactions. Not typically a 5 lakh company with very limited even there. We don't have any other bank account. We provide for all the liabilities, all those things, compliances, and nothing that caused him to believe that the representations are misstated. One more thing is regarding the dividend new clause, whether the dividend declared and paid in compliance with section 123 of the Act, interim dividend as well as final dividend. This will also come under the other regulatory requirements. Dividend at dividend proposed dividend provide and I hope all of you know that. 2016 accounting standards rules amended. But 22 March finalize board sir, we would like to give declare a recommended dividend. The board recommends a dividend. Board recommended dividend 20%. And when we propose dividend below P&L, so-called appropriation. After arriving in this, we would have mentioned or reserves in the bracket. And also we used to provide for CDT, corporate dividend tax. That is not there now. dividend is now taxed back in the hands of the shareholders, recipients. So provision for proposed dividend is not required because by definition, it does not become an adjusting event. Accounting standard for adjusting event necessitating an accounting hit as on 31st March 2022. It will be accounted for only in 22-23 when finally declared and paid. And then a mention has to be made in the notes on accounts. What's reported on dividend, they'll be very loud and vocal, is it not? But then notes AS4 requirement. That's not in relation to this. I thought I'll just highlight that. Caro will drop the initial point. Main report. Caro 197 Caro main report. 197 compliance reporting requirement Caro no. Sure. This 190 Caro 197 Caro point to drop you. But other than that, did I miss out? I have to check. I'm not 100% sure. I'm open. Not fully agreeing because 197 Caro main body of the report under Vishwas. The Caro. Anyway, we'll just sing. I'm not concluding it there. Please make reference and do it. I did mention that Institute had brought in the useful references possible here are amendments to Schedule 3, all the 3 volumes, non-Ind AS, Ind AS, and BFC, and guidance note on Caro 2020. Soft copy or hard copy anengil onnengil namukku download ചെയ്ത് print എടുക്കാം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ CDS ൽ പോയി മേടിക്കാം. Those new members, in case if you want to interact on professional matters, this is my reference, jomon@gmail.com, my phone number. And this is a website of a firm. Our firm, we are allowed to have websites. We are allowed to even on the GEM portal. So going forward, we have to look at newer opportunities and market a little bit. Not prohibited per se. Ethical standards allow us to have, websites. So we get references, website based, listing on InfoPark, all those things we can do. Same question. Jago Mohan has asked this question. CSR amount is determined once the net profit is arrived at, but net profit gets finalized after 31st March every year. So there will be always some unpaid amount. Am I right? So, sir, the net profit of the previous years, this year's is not considered. So with that, unless there are questions, we'll round up. Thank you very much, Ajit, Kaimal, and the team for the opportunity. Some fresh insights when I got 197 chit company. Anyway, I'm not getting into that unless I get into a chit company assignment. Till such time, let your wisdom prevail. But points are to be debated and long outstanding understandings may require correction. That is also possible. So let's continue to interact. So whether we like it or not, Schedule 3 as well as Caro 2020 have come to stay. Responsibilities are on us, so both on the auditors. No client is going to prepare new Schedule 3 compliant financial statements. And one thing which I mentioned earlier is that get maximum work to the extent possible done by the moment there's a change, the client thinks that it is all that of the auditor's work. It should not be. Slowly we can change. That should change in government companies. C&AG audits, all those things where they have to give the details. The students, we always tell them, you talk about statutory reconciliations, GST month-wise reconciliation. Don't go and prepare, get it done. Assist them, that's the way we should do it. You can reduce the time which you spend in an audit and a lot of things can improve. And the partner can focus on which requires more focus, objectively evaluate on that. So thank you so much for a great evening. Taken a lot of time. Okay. This topic both are very lengthy and required a minimum amount of time. Of course, there are some, deviations from the topic which I thought was relevant in the context of discussing. Otherwise, the topic would have become very dull.